Chapter 14. Maggie. 10 minutes seemed like 2 hours. I'd changed clothes, washed my face, and crawled into bed, but I'd seen no sign of Gabe. After another 5 minutes, I peeked out the window to make sure his car was still in the driveway. It was. Get a grip, Maggie. I opened the Netflix app and scrolled through the never-ending list of movies. The extra time gave me a chance to replay the previous few hours in my mind. Other than the weirdness with the police officer, Gabe had seemed happy to spend time with me. Heaven help me, I'd enjoyed him tonight. And that Bruno Mars song? My God, what woman wouldn't melt after that? Not even the crap with Justin and his wife could stop the constant fluttering in my stomach. I could easily fall in love with him again. But what if my mother was right? What if Gabe dumped me like before? This time, I had 3 kids and a possible job to consider. This is a bad idea. Gabe knocked and poked his head into the room.
Sorry about that. I had some business to handle.
Maybe we should call it a night. It's been a long day. I forced a smile.
Not for nothing, Mags, but you're giving me whiplash.
He stepped into the room, and my willpower short-circuited. He'd lost his shirt somewhere between his room and mine. Years ago, he'd made my mouth water, but now, my God, he'd filled out. Six-pack didn't quite describe the ripples of muscle down his abdomen. I could spend hours exploring the peaks and valleys. A dusting of dark hair started at his belly button and disappeared beneath his low-slung jeans. Sorry, I wanted to keep my distance, but I couldn't stop staring at his damn chest. Stay, we can watch a movie. He plopped down beside me.
Uh-huh. What's on your mind?
I don't know. I mean, maybe you staying here isn't a good idea. It's bringing up all sorts of things for me.
Come here.
He held his arm out. As much as I wanted to curl up against him, I couldn't will myself to move.
Stop worrying so damn much. I don't bite.
I knew exactly how and where he liked to bite. Easier said than done. I haven't talked to you in years, and 10 minutes ago you had your tongue down my throat.
If memory serves, you started it.
He pulled me toward him and massaged my shoulders.
What do you want to talk about?
I dropped my chin to my chest to give him better access to my pressure points. This is my chance. I have to take it. I don't know. Tell me about your new job. What exactly is the family business? His hands stilled as if he needed a minute to figure out how to answer.
My father's company does acquisitions, mostly in the hospitality industry, bars, restaurants, hotels. We find properties in trouble or on the verge of bankruptcy. The owners are generally eager to sell. We buy them, fix them up, and turn them for a profit.
He nudged me.
Lay down.
What if they don't want to sell? I stretched out on my belly. He shifted his weight as if reaching for something, then moved to straddle me. A squishy sound told me he'd found my lotion. Gabe slid his slick hands under my t-shirt and worked the knots in my lower back.
They always want to sell.
Sounds a little strong-armed to me. Do you ever keep the properties?
Only in New Orleans. My father owns several boutique hotels. Leo and Enzo have restaurants, and I have the bar.
I made a mental note to jot the information down. What about your other brothers?
Before he died, Joe worked on acquisitions with my father. Marco is a corporate attorney for the business, and Dante is still in grad school.
Where does he go to college? My body relaxed, but my brain kicked into high gear. I'd assumed the younger 2 Marchionni boys were business owners when I'd written the proposal for Marlena. I'd have to do some tweaking to make it work.
LSU.
Gabe worked the long muscles on either side of my spine.
I'm buying my bar from my father. It's almost paid off.
His voice deepened as if he were proud of himself. The change of subject surprised me. I glanced over my shoulder. Did he cut you a deal?
I'm paying fair market, but he holds the loan. Like the arrangement Joe had on this house. Pretty much everything goes through the folks, whether we want it to or not.
He pushed my shirt to my shoulders.
Take this off.
Careful not to flash him my boobs or poo belly. I pulled the t-shirt over my head. Why would you want to give that up to take your father's job?
I don't want to give it up, but how can I say no? His company is his life's work. I can't turn him down. It would have gone to Joe. Now it falls to me.
He straddled my thighs. Gabe had always had a competitive streak with his brothers, especially Joe. That, coupled with his constant need to please his parents, had caused most of the problems in our relationship. NOLA Society readers would love a peek into his psyche, but I wouldn't go there. No, I'd find a different angle for his article. How sad.
It's not sad. It's life. You, of all people, should get that. You gave up your dreams to come here and raise the kids.
I shook my head. I always wanted to be an author. I haven't given it up, but it's taking longer to write the new novel than I'd hoped.
How about the mother part?
I never imagined it would happen like this, but I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Didn't you want kids of your own?
He pressed his fingers into my neck in slow circles. I never thought much about it, but I'm okay with what I have. I mean, how many women can have 3 kids and no stretch marks? Gabe moved his hands back to my shoulders.
How do you know you won't want more one day?
I guess I don't. He leaned forward and whispered into my ear.
Relax.
I'm trying. I laughed, but it would have been easier without his thighs on either side of me, not to mention his breath in my ear. Gabe's phone rang. Are you going to answer?
No.
His voice deepened. I would never be a neat freak, but certain things bugged me. Cabinets left open, clothes hanging out of drawers, and unanswered calls. Gabe fought a losing battle to work the tension from my muscles.
I know you're writing the cultural reviews, but I didn't know you were working on another novel. What's it about?
I sighed and tried to relax again. The same as the last 4. Female James Bond, international espionage. The publisher's breathing down my neck, but it's hard to find time to write. I don't want to put Ryan in daycare, and it's hard to be creative with a preschooler running around. I'll finish it soon.
Do you enjoy writing?
The question took me off guard. Fiction, yes. The freelance stuff, no, not really.
Still thinking about Justin?
His hands moved to my lower back. I wasn't until you said his name. I grinned against the mattress. I feel like an ass. I mean, we only went out a couple of times, but we talked on the phone until late at night. I never suspected he was married. He made a sound behind me that made me want to turn around, but he rubbed a tender spot, and it felt too good to move.
Were you falling for him?
I thought he was a nice guy. Older, steady.
You didn't answer my question.
I've only ever been in love with one person. Gabe's hands stilled. I'd said too much, or maybe I hadn't said enough. Are you dating anyone? He sighed and got back to work.
I haven't had time.
I turned and gave him a, yeah, right, look.
I'm serious.
He put his hand on my head and pushed me back down. What's it been, a month? I bit my lip to hold back laughter.
10 months, give or take.
Holy crap. I should have let the subject go, but I wanted answers now that I had him talking. Did you love her? Ella's mother?
We barely knew each other.
He pressed harder, as if taking out his frustration on my muscles. I made a pained sound and he eased the pressure.
Sorry. Bad subject.
Gabe moved off me and reached for my shirt. I couldn't stand the lost look in his eyes or the fact that I'd put it there. I did my best to slip into my shirt without flashing him, but I must have given him a glimpse of side boob or something. The man stared at me as if I were the star of his fantasies. My mom didn't know shit. Not about Gabe. 15 extra pounds or not, he liked what he'd seen. I tilted my head. You okay over there? He licked his lips.
I'm rethinking the sweats.
I winced before I could stop myself. This is what I mean about bringing up old feelings. Sometimes this feels like it used to, but sometimes it's like we're strangers. I don't want to get hurt again.
I'm not Justin, and I'm not the same jerk from 4 years ago. I'm not going to hurt you.
He must have seen something in my expression because he sighed and glanced away.
Sleep beside me tonight.
Just sleep? He crossed his heart.
Like you said, it's been a tough day. The kids aren't here to catch us. I don't know about you, but I'd rather not be alone.
Knowing better than to give in, I curled against him. It wouldn't end well. We wouldn't end well. But damn it, I wanted one night to believe we'd beat the odds.
Chapter 15. Gabe. For the second Saturday in a row, I woke to a car door slamming and the dog going nuts in the living room. Coco ran from the window to the door and back in a figure-8 pattern that, along with her deep barks, set my teeth on edge. Saturday. Shit. It's little girl dance recital day. I extracted myself from Chloe and Ryan, who crawled into my bed during the night. A habit Maggie said I'd have to break sooner or later, but I didn't have the heart to do it now. I got it. They miss their dad, and I miss my big brother. The 2 weeks in Chantal had dropped Ella into my life had flown by. Maggie and I had established a comfortable routine. We pulled opposite shifts, which sucked, but it gave me an excuse to crawl into her bed when I came home. We'd talk about the kids, the bar, life in general until she fell back asleep. Then I'd return to my room alone, though I seldom woke that way. Maggie worried about the kids finding us in bed together, but I was smart enough to know she had other reasons. Reasons like, the more we shared a bed, the more likely we'd have sex. I told her I'd wait, and I would, but my father's ultimatum hung over my head. Not to mention my balls had gone from sky blue to cobalt. Enough, Coco. The damn dog made enough noise to wake the entire house. It had to be my mother coming early to check on Chloe. Who else would visit before 8 on a Saturday morning? Still in my pajama bottoms, I opened the door. Nadine took me in from my bare feet to my unshaved face and bed-rumpled hair. "Where's Mary Margaret?" "Maggie's sleeping in. She was up late." I took a step back and motioned for her to come in. "Where are the children? Today is Chloe's recital. Shouldn't they be up by now?" She nudged the dog out of her way, pulled her purse higher on her shoulder, and headed toward the hall. I stepped into her path. The recital's not until 10:30. I'd rather you not wake Maggie. She doesn't get a chance to sleep in often. "Who are you to tell me about my daughter?" "Someone who cares a lot about her." I folded my arms. Nadine took another step forward, but I held my ground. We glared at each other until the doorbell rang. Again. I grinned and went to the door. My grin didn't last long. "Jesus, Mary and Joseph, Gabriel. Is this how you open the door? Half-dressed?" My mother pushed into the house, looking over Mrs. Guthrie like last week's leftovers. "Nadine, nice to see you again." "Evelyn?" Nadine narrowed her eyes. "Where's Maggie? We're supposed to go to breakfast before the recital." My mother dropped her purse on the sofa. "She's sleeping. Ella kept us up most of the night. Maggie's going to flip. I gotta get them out of here." "The poor dear. Did the pediatrician change her formula?" "Yeah, she's on soy now." She kissed my cheek, likely for Nadine's benefit. "Where are my grandchildren?" "Everyone's still sleeping." I ran my hand over the back of my neck. Nadine made me nuts, but Nadine and Evelyn together were more than anyone should have to endure. "Have a seat. I'll start some coffee." Maggie staggered down the hallway in one of her oversized t-shirts and little else. She offered me a sleepy smile on her way to the coffee pot. I nodded toward the living room, but she didn't take the hint. Nadine cleared her throat. Maggie turned her head and her face paled. I leaned close and whispered, "Our mothers are here. We're supposed to have breakfast before the recital." "Oh no. What time is it?" Maggie went from sleep-deprived zombie to alert and freaking out in no time flat. 8:15, Nadine said from the bar. Maggie turned and looked between Nadine and Evelyn, and then shot me a dirty look. "I'll get the kids up." What the hell did I do this time? I kept my eyes on the pot while the coffee brewed. "Where are the kids?" Maggie called from upstairs. "In my room." I answered before I thought the better of it. Nadine huffed. "Where did you sleep?" Evelyn's smile changed from forced to downright cheerful. While she wanted me to bring all of her grandchildren under her roof and for the Guthrie women to disappear, she wouldn't pass up the chance to rub Nadine's nose in mine and Maggie's relationship. "With Maggie, where else? They're getting to know each other. We're getting to know each other, and no, we aren't sharing a bed." I shot my mom a warning look. The last thing I needed was her blabbing about the engagement before I'd gotten around to talking to Maggie about it. Nadine narrowed her eyes and glanced between us. "Don't tell me you approve of this situation." Evelyn shrugged. "What's to approve of?" They're adults. As long as they're happy and the kids are taken care of, I think it's wonderful. It's too early for this. Coffee? Either they hadn't heard or they ignored me. The mood in the house had gone from cold to downright hostile in a matter of moments. If something didn't change, I'd be refereeing a senior citizen cage match. Thankfully, Zach shuffled into the kitchen, hugged each of his grandmothers, and wandered to the coffee pot. Good morning, I grinned. With his rumpled hair and drowsy smile, he reminded me of my older brother. Is it? Zach yawned and filled his mug. Ryan emerged next, raring to go. Grandma's! Nadine and my mother held their arms out to the boy, but he bypassed them and went straight to me. Hey, little man, hungry? I picked him up. It might have been wrong to use a small child as a human shield, but I'd take what I could get. I poured 2 cups of coffee and set one in front of each mother. I should get Ella dressed. You aren't bringing a newborn to a dance recital, are you? Nadine raised her chin and looked down her nose. Why shouldn't he? Ella's a good baby. Hardly makes a sound. Evelyn turned and glared. Nadine huffed. It's rude. People are there to watch their children dance, not to listen to a baby cry. God love her, my mother laughed and raised the tension in the room to DEFCON 5. I've been to enough of these things to know she won't be the only crying baby in the building. Oh, so she will be crying, Nadine smirked. My daughter has enough to deal with, getting Chloe ready. She doesn't have time to take care of an infant. Evelyn pushed into the other woman's personal space. My son will take care of his child. Enough, ladies. I used the same tone as I had with the dog. It's too early in the morning for this. Why don't you 2 go have breakfast? We'll meet you at the auditorium. I'm not leaving until I speak with my daughter. Nadine put her hands on her hips. You're right, Mrs. Guthrie. Maggie has enough to deal with this morning. I set Ryan down and moved around the bar. One hand on each woman's shoulder, I guided them to the living room. You 2 need to go. Enjoy breakfast together. We'll meet you there. Of course. Evelyn smiled and plucked her purse from the couch. Put Ella in the adorable pink dress I bought her. I will. I kissed my mother's cheek and opened the door. Nadine's frown deepened, but she left. Even with the door closed, their voices carried inside the house. Zach shook his head and took his coffee to his room. Meanwhile, Ryan crawled onto a bar stool and picked up Nadine's abandoned mug. Oh, no you don't. I took the cup from his hands. How about some cereal? Pancakes? Ryan giggled. Cereal. I pulled a box out of the pantry. Pancakes? The boy folded his arms and gave me a look that promised a tantrum if I didn't comply. Pancakes it is. I added, stop giving in to the 3-year-old terrorist to my list of shit to do. 15 minutes later, I set a plate of pancakes in front of Ryan. These are weird. The kid eyed his breakfast. Cereal, please. I closed my eyes and counted to 10. You're killing me, little dude. Do I smell pancakes? Zach came back out of his cave. I took the plate from Minnie bin Laden and slid them to the teen. Dragging her dance bag behind her, Chloe walked down the hall. Good morning, princess. Want some pancakes? One look at her and my smile faded. She looked like hell in a pink leotard and black tutu. Before I could ask, Chloe grabbed her stomach and barfed on the carpet. The room erupted in movement. The boys groaned and abandoned their breakfast. Ryan's milk spilled during the melee. I knelt beside Chloe and she showered my chest in vomit. Maggie ran into the room. She took one look at the situation, turned, and ran toward the bathroom. Chloe glanced down at her ruined dance costume and burst into tears. No! I'd seen war veterans go into a post-traumatic fugue state, but had never experienced one myself until then. My mind blanked. My tutu! Come with me. I tossed my shirt in the laundry, took her hand, and led her to the bathroom. I don't feel good. Chloe sobbed while I mopped the puke from her tutu with a frilly white hand towel. One of Maggie's special, decorative-only hand towels. Shit. I know, sweetie. I wiped the carnage from my chest and started to shower. You feel like you're going to throw up again? I don't think so. Okay, let's get you cleaned up. Chloe nodded, her shoulders shaking with each sob. I placed my hand on her forehead and frowned. She had a fever. Do you want me to stay here, or do you need privacy? Privacy. I worried she'd fall or vomit again and freak out, but I understood. I'll get you some PJs and wait in the hall in case you need me." "I love you, Uncle Gabe." My heart melted. Getting puked on was worth it. Almost. "Love you too, Munchkin." After the quick bath, I tucked the girl into bed. Her forehead didn't feel as warm as it had, and her color looked better, but I hated to leave her alone. Tears leaked from Chloe's eyes. "What's the matter?" I smoothed her hair back from her face.
"I'm going to miss my recital."
"What if we hold another one? We'll invite the family. It'll be a one-woman show."
"Will there be a stage?"
Her expression brightened, and I knew she'd be okay. "Of course."
"And a pink costume with wings?"
I booped her nose. "Is there any other kind?" Chloe snuggled into her pillow.
"Okay."
"I need to check on Ella and Maggie. Will you be okay for a few minutes?" She nodded and patted the side of the bed. The chocolate lab hopped up and curled against the little girl. The dog and I shared a look. Coco was a pain in the ass, but she'd keep an eye on her master. I stepped into the master bedroom and peeked into the crib. Sound asleep, Ella sucked an imaginary bottle. I could have watched her sleep for hours, but a noise from the bathroom drew my attention. I leaned close to the door and lowered my voice. "Maggie?" When she didn't respond, I poked my head inside. "Mags?" She'd fallen asleep while spooning the toilet. I touched her shoulder. "Wake up, sweetheart." She raised her head with the most pitiful expression I'd ever seen.
"Help me to my bedroom. I don't want Ella to get sick."
I slid an arm around her waist, hoisted her to her feet, and half carried her to my bed. "Stay in here. It's closer to the bathroom. Chloe's in bed."
"Is she okay?"
She started to get up, more than likely planning to check on the girl. "She's fine. Coco's keeping an eye on her." Maggie curled into the pillows.
"Aren't our mothers still here?"
"No, I threw them out for bad behavior." I pulled the blankets to her chin.
"They hate each other."
"Gee, I hadn't noticed." "I know."
"Check to see if the boys have a fever. If not, send them to my mom."
"Would it be all right if they went to my parents instead?"
"Why?"
The look Nadine gave me on her way out. She nodded against the pillow and whispered,
"Call your mom. But promise me you'll testify if she uses this against me in the custody hearing."
Chapter 16. Maggie. With Chloe sleeping and the rest of the kiddos at their grandmother's for the night, the house was quiet. Too quiet. I had nothing to do, so I'd spent the day feeling like garbage and thinking about my life. Under the circumstances, that wasn't a good idea. To distract myself, I retrieved my laptop from my room. Maybe I could squeeze out a couple of chapters on my new book before I went back to sleep. An email from Shauna caught my eye. From the looks of it, she'd spent a considerable amount of time researching the Marchionni family. I scrolled through genealogy records that made my head spin. Names and dates and places, births and deaths and marriages. Too much to comprehend in one sitting. My phone rang, and I nearly toppled out of bed trying to reach it. "Hello?" "You're going to die, bitch." The caller hung up. I glanced at the screen. Blocked number. I thought prank calls died sometime in the 90s.
Mags?
Gabe knocked and opened the door. I dropped my cell and snapped the laptop closed. "Is Chloe okay?" He gave me the same look he had when he'd stared at my boobs. Crazy man. Sure, I was in bed, but there was nothing sexy about my reading glasses and ponytail. I pulled the blanket higher on my chest.
She's sleeping. Can I come in?
His gaze drifted to my shoulders. "Sure, it's your room." He plopped down on the chair near the window.
Want to watch a movie?
"I'm really tired. I'm going to sleep once I finish checking my email."
We could watch a chick flick.
He wiggled his brows. "Just so you know, porn isn't the same thing as a chick flick."
I beg to differ, but that's not what I had in mind. Come on, Mags. You can pick the movie.
Biting his lower lip, Gabe dipped his chin and peered through his lashes. The expression would have looked feminine on most men, but he wasn't most men. "Don't give me puppy eyes. We'll do it another time, I promise." I wanted nothing more than to curl up beside him, but I had work to do. "Oh, I've been meaning to ask you, what happens to your bar once you take over for your dad?
You know, I asked Joe a similar question in this exact spot.
He stood as if to leave. My reporter's instincts kicked in. I'd hit a nerve. When was that? Gabe hesitated and picked up a photo of my sister and her husband.
Shortly after Zach was born, Joe planned to start working with our father. I pointed out he'd be traveling a lot.
I nodded, though I couldn't shake the feeling he'd lied or at very least held something back.
How can you stand to be in this room?
Speaking through gritted teeth, he slammed the picture face down on the dresser. Once again, his reaction surprised me. I feel strange getting rid of their stuff. I don't usually stay in here.
I get that, but I don't think anyone would mind if you changed things to your taste.
He motioned from the collection of family photos to the stack of books on the nightstand. Joe and Rebecca wouldn't mind because they were dead, but the kids might have a problem with me messing with their parents' things. I'd rather not.
Do you like it here?
Chin raised, he stared down at me. I wrapped my arms around my middle. Why is he so upset? It's okay. Gabe seemed to pick up on my distress and softened his tone.
If you ever decide you want to move, I'd be happy to help you and the kids get a new house.
I couldn't ask you to do that. I forced myself to meet his gaze. Besides, this is their home. How could I move them when they have been through so much?
Maybe they need a new beginning as much as you do.
He walked to the door.
Sweet dreams, Maggie.
That's it? He's leaving? Wait, you didn't answer my question. I think I have a right to know what happens to your bar since I'm an employee now.
We can talk tomorrow. I'm going to turn in. Should I sleep in your bed?
The change in his demeanor concerned me, but it also told me where to dig for information on the story. I'll move. I grabbed my laptop and marched to my room. Gabe followed.
Maggie, wait. I didn't mean to chase you off.
I set the computer on my nightstand. It's fine. I'm sick and you're tired. We both need some rest.
I'd rather not think about giving up my bar.
His expression reminded me of Zach's any time he talked about his parents. Gabe mourned the loss of his bar. It made sense, but it broke my heart. I understood family obligations better than most people, but I couldn't understand him turning his back on his dream. I slid beneath the blankets and plucked the remote from the nightstand. Still up for a movie? You can choose.
Sure, but what I could really use is a Jack and Coke and sex.
I wanted to call him out for avoiding questions any time they hit too close to a nerve. However, he chose that moment to strip out of his jeans and climbed in beside me in his boxer briefs. My stomach did a backflip that had nothing to do with the virus rampaging through my body. I can't drink, or I might throw up again, and sex is off the table.
Okay, how about a blowjob?
He poked my side. That's sex.
No, it's not. Everyone knows that. Bill Clinton made it legally not sex back in the 90s.
I smacked his arm and curled up beside him.
I'm kidding.
He flipped through the channels. My phone rang from the other room. Crap.
I'll get it.
Gabe hopped out of bed. Fighting off exhaustion, I ran through my to-do list. I didn't have time to get sick. I needed to finish the damned article and get paid before the custody hearing.
Missed the call, it was a blocked number.
He tossed the cell to me and it dinged with a voicemail alert. I hit replay and listened to the same raspy voice call me every name for a female of questionable morals I'd ever heard, and some I hadn't.
Mags?
Second prank call tonight? I deleted the message. He frowned and stretched out beside me.
I can have the calls traced.
I'm sure it's nothing. I had a feeling it was something, but after the day I'd had, I didn't want to get into it. Nuzzling into the pillow, I flashed him a smile to butter him up. Are you up for watching the kids Wednesday morning?
Sure, but where are you going?
I have to do some research for a new piece I'm working on. Then I have a shift at the bar.
What happened with the cultural reviews?
Gabe rolled to face me. They pulled my article. I'm on a new assignment. I have to finish it soon.
I can watch them.
He brushed my hair back from my face. Thank you. I'll write down everyone's schedule. I should be home by 3.
Have you spoken to your lawyer about the hearing?
I closed my eyes and debated on how to answer. Lying or avoiding seemed like the best options, but he'd find out the truth sooner or later. Attorneys cost money.
Now that I'm living here, my folks should back off.
My stomach did another somersault. I'd owe him big time if he managed to get Evelyn off my case. That'd be great, but I'll believe it when I see it. He drew his brows together and tensed his jaw, an expression I knew meant he had something unpleasant to discuss. What's wrong? Nerves thinned my voice.
Nothing.
He glanced back to the television.
How's it going at the bar?
It's fun. I sincerely doubted he'd intended to talk about my second job.
How do you feel about hiring a nanny? I could change our schedules so we would see more of each other.
Aha, I knew it. I eased back from him. I don't want a nanny.
If I didn't know better, I'd think you were trying to avoid me by working different shifts.
He grinned, likely to hide the insecurity in his words. Once again, his expression made me pause. Gabe was a lot of things, but unsure of himself? Never. I like having you here, now that you're not drinking from the milk carton. He tugged my body against his.
Think about it, Mags. When it slows down at the bar, you could use the time to finish the novel. Hell, you could even go back to school.
I can't afford a nanny, and you're going back to your life in another week or so. Although I could use the time to finish my novel. Lord knew I needed the check from the publisher. Still, I didn't feel right about pawning the kids off on someone else. Rebecca had left them in my hands, not a nanny's.
About that.
Gabe pulled back enough to meet my gaze.
I don't want to move out. Let's make us official.
A million questions popped into my head. What did he mean, official? Dating? Would I wear his class ring and Letterman jacket? Was that an offhanded proposal? What would the kids think? Could I do this again with him? Gabe's cell rang. He leaned over the bed, pulled it from his jeans, and hit the ignore button. Memories of the weeks and months after our breakup crashed over me. I couldn't help but wonder who called him at all hours of the day and night and why he never answered. I sat up and scooted away. You have a bad habit of not answering your cell.
Block number.
He clasped his hands behind his head, the picture of relaxed.
Maybe your prankster moved on to me.
I knew him. I recognized the tension in his jaw and that his grin hadn't crinkled the corners of his eyes. Gabe had lied to me. You should go. Chloe might come looking for me, or my mother could show up in the morning. The thought of my mother finding him in my bed made my head hurt almost as much as his dishonesty.
Your mother already thinks we're sleeping together.
My throat tightened. Why does she think that?
She got the wrong idea this morning.
He shrugged and nudged my side.
May as well do the deed. I'm sure both our mothers already lit candles for our sinful souls.
Perfect. I drew my knees to my chest. One more thing your mom can use against me in court.
I'll get her to drop the custody case, but it would be easier to do if you had my ring on your finger.
Blood rushed behind my eardrums. That was definitely an offhanded proposal. His phone rang again. This time he cursed and turned it off. My nerves sparked like downed power lines. Who keeps calling you?
It's another blocked number, probably a solicitor.
He reached for my hand.
I want this. I want you. Let's go ring shopping.
I can't marry you. We're just now getting to know each other again. Part of me wanted to laugh, the other wanted to cry. I'd never stopped loving him, but he'd broken my heart. I couldn't go through that again. I wouldn't survive it. Gabe's expression grew more serious.
She's wrong, you know.
Who?
Your mother. Guys like me do fall for women like you.
My mouth moved, though no sound came out. I stared for a beat and dipped my chin. I couldn't look at him, not when I felt so damned humiliated. You heard that?
Yeah.
He took my hand and pulled until I rested against his chest.
Nothing personal, but your mother's a bitch. Took everything I had not to toss her out on her skinny ass last week, and man, oh man, did I enjoy kicking her out this morning.
She's had a tough time since her divorce and worries about me getting hurt. I hated myself for defending her, but she was my mom.
There's no excuse.
He ran a hand up my back.
Let me hold you tonight. We'll talk about the rest in the morning.
I weighed my options. Chloe might come downstairs, but I could always lock the bedroom door. I sighed, preparing to turn him down when it hit me. I didn't want him to leave. Not tonight. Not ever. I'd always loved him, but at some point since he showed up on my doorstep, I'd tripped and fallen back in love with him. Stay.
That was too easy. Are you sure?
He nuzzled his face into my hair. Are you trying to talk me out of it?
No.
Gabe chuckled.
Close your eyes and get some rest.
I feel better.
Good.
You convinced me to sleep with you and all you want to do is sleep? I slid my hand down his back to his ass.
Crazy what we do for love, isn't it?
He kissed the top of my head.
Good night, Maggie.
He used the L word. It seems silly that those 4 letters could make my pulse race faster than it had when he'd all but asked me to marry him. For once in my life, I settled into the warm, fuzzy feeling of belonging without the fear of it all coming down around me. Good night, Gabe.
Chapter 17, Gabe. The digital clock on the nightstand proved far less entertaining than the fully clothed woman in my arms, but I stared at it anyway. I needed the distraction to keep my mind and my hands still. She'd taken me by surprise when she'd asked me to stay. Hell, I'd surprised myself with the half-assed proposal. I should have known better than to spring it on her like that. She deserved better, but Maggie had a way of making me act before I thought. When we dated before, her intensity had scared me. Not that I minded smart women, quite the contrary. But in my line of work, a strong-willed woman didn't last long. She'd ask questions and demand answers I couldn't give. At 21, her optimism shined like the sun. She believed she could change the world, and I had no doubt she would succeed. The woman had every conceivable detail of her future planned out. When I realized those plans included me, I made the decision to let her go for her own good. Who was I to tie her to a world she would never understand, let alone accept? Only the man who regretted pushing her away every fucking day of my life. I'd avoided her until Joe and Rebecca's funeral. Maggie had seemed so different then. She'd matured in the years we'd spent apart. Oddly enough, she'd taken on more of Rebecca's softer, more nurturing personality. Lately, she even looked more like her sister. Maggie had traded in her sexy skinny jeans and high heels for yoga pants and sneakers. Since the funeral, it seemed like she'd focused all of her energy and determination on a single goal, being a surrogate mother and father to 3 grieving children. As much as I hated to admit it, I missed the old Maggie. The girl with fire in her veins, the gorgeous, self-confident woman who wouldn't let anyone or anything stop her from reaching her dreams. She was in there somewhere. All I had to do was draw her out. Maggie's phone rang. She bolted upright and nearly broke my nose in the process. "Sorry, are you okay?" Pain bloomed in my face and my vision blurred. "I'll live." She searched for her phone. "Where's my cell? It could be about the kids." I plucked it from the nightstand and handed it to her. "This better be good, Shauna. It's 5 in the morning." She listened a moment. A garbled female voice came across the line, but I couldn't make out what she'd said. Maggie nodded several times and turned to me. One word rang out loud and clear. "Marchionni. Shauna, this isn't funny." Maggie's brow furrowed and the color drained from her face. "He's right here. I need to go." Her complexion changed from pale to angry red. "That was Shauna. She's close with Dahlia, your brother's friend. Would you mind telling me why half of New Orleans thinks we're engaged?" "Already?" Once again, my mouth got ahead of my brain. "What do you mean, already?" Maggie crawled out of the bed and paced. "What in the hell is going on? Why are you really here?" My temples throbbed, along with my nose. "Slow down, Mags. Let me explain." "I don't want to hear it. Put some freaking clothes on and get out." She turned her back to me, but she couldn't hide the fact she was crying. "Maggie, we have court in 2 days. Did your mother put you up to this?" She rounded on me. "Not exactly." "What do you mean, not exactly?" Her voice had quieted several notches, but her anger bubbled beneath the surface.
How does anyone know anything about this? You just mentioned a ring last night. By the way, that was a piss-poor proposal, if that's what you meant it to be.
It was. It is. I eased closer to her. I went to my folks when Ella's mother...
This is bad. If the magazine finds out... She hugged herself and bent at the waist.
Sweetheart, you need to calm down. I rested my hand between her shoulders. Maggie stood upright, but her gaze flitted around the room.
What do your parents have to do with this?
You know how they are. I showed up with a baby, they insisted I get married.
To Ella's mother, right? How did I get dragged into this?
I dug my fingers into my temples. That's what I'm trying to explain. She pressed her lips together and nodded. I sat on the edge of the bed. You have to understand. You were the first person I thought about when I found out about Ella. She gave me a look. I swear on my grandmother's grave. I took her hand. I always wanted kids, but I wanted them with you. She opened her mouth, likely to argue. I put my finger to her full lips. Let me finish. When my folks started in on the, if you're man enough to be a father, you're man enough to marry the mother speech, I panicked. I told them I wouldn't marry Chantal. My father, he knew how I felt about you before.
But we weren't even speaking to each other, let alone a couple.
But, sweetheart, I wanted to be. I wanted you every day of my life. I know, but this is my father we're talking about. He saw a means to an end and took it. He'll take my bar if I don't marry you.
Can he do that?
Her eyes widened. Yes, he can call the loan any time. I sighed and took her hands in mine. Maggie, think about it. We can make it work. She flinched, as if I'd hit her.
What you said last night, this has nothing to do with how you feel about me. You're trying to hold on to your bar.
I am, but didn't you hear me when I said you were the first person I thought about?
I need you to leave.
We have to do this. They'll take the kids from you if we don't. I regretted my words as soon as I'd said them. Maggie's mouth fell open. She turned and stormed out of the room. I followed, taking her arm before she reached the kitchen. Maggie, wait. She pulled away.
Don't. I thought maybe you'd changed. It's bad enough you're using me, but to hold the kids over my head?
I'm not using you. I took a step back to give her space. This could be good for both of us. Maggie folded her arms.
Do you actually expect me to play along with this?
Hear me out. This isn't about the bar. I'm going to lose it anyway. She turned her head. You're struggling to make ends meet. You hate your job, and I bet you'd love to finish your novel. Maybe go back to grad school? I'm struggling with Ella. I have to give up a job I love and take one I may hate. My father told me to marry you or bring all 4 grandkids to my mother. They're never going to stop fighting you for custody. But if we get married, they'll back off.
What about Ella's mother? What if she comes back?
Listen to me. Chantal made it clear she wants nothing to do with raising a child. She isn't coming back, and even if she did, it wouldn't change anything. My bluntness seemed to surprise her.
You should have told them the truth from the beginning.
I know, and I'm sorry. I struggled to find the right words, not wanting to piss her off even more. But it could work. You could make rules. Think about it, Mags. No more worrying about bills. No more looking over your shoulder worrying about my mother.
Bullshit. She'd be even more in my business as my mother-in-law. Plus, I'm Catholic.
What? It took my brain a minute to catch up to her. So what? So am I.
We don't do divorce.
Her voice softened. I wanted to pull her into my arms and kiss her stupid. Maybe then she'd understand how much I loved her. Catholics aren't supposed to have premarital sex or use birth control either. Besides, I don't plan to get divorced. Maggie's brows climbed into her hairline.
Do you expect me to believe you actually want to marry me?
I wanted to tell her I loved her, but doubted she'd believe me. I'd never felt so off my game. Running my hand over the back of my neck, I searched for the right words, the words that would make this beautiful creature understand. Maggie turned, walked to her bedroom, and shut the door. My nose ached to the point I could feel my heartbeat in my nostrils. I needed to ice it, but I followed her. Damn it, Maggie. I know I'm screwing this up. Would you just listen? Please, go. I need time to think before the boys come home. No. I searched the top of the doorframe for the key and turned the lock. She shot to her feet. If you don't get out, I'm going to call the police. Do what you have to do, but they'll take one look at my face and arrest you for domestic abuse.
Chapter 18. Maggie. He wouldn't. Gabe was a lot of things, but he wasn't the kind of man who would allow a woman to be arrested for something she didn't do. Then again, I never thought he'd play with my feelings to save his precious bar or reputation or whatever he was doing here. I shut my eyes because looking at him hurt, and I needed time to sort out my feelings before I said something I couldn't take back. Please leave. He closed the distance and pulled me against him.
Since you won't listen, let me try a different tactic.
That's the problem. You shouldn't have to use tactics in a— One moment I struggled to break free, the next his lips were on mine. Pulling back enough to meet my gaze, he whispered,
Damn it, Maggie. I love you.
I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him, and I suppose I did believe him. I loved him too and always had, but was that enough? Gabe didn't give me the chance to respond. He curled his fingers in my hair and yanked my head back. I gasped. The moment my lips parted, he delved into my mouth. My body melted, but my brain revolted. I'd dreamed of this for 4 years. The same 4 years I'd spent sobbing into my pillow. Gabe's kiss felt like home, but part of me wanted to run away and join the circus. He pulled back and held my gaze.
Don't overthink this.
What? He slid his hand beneath my sweats and grabbed my butt. Half lifting and half pressing, he ground his hips into mine. Oh, that, I murmured against his lips. Gabe released me, turned me around, and pressed his chest to my back. With one hand across my belly, he slipped the other under my shirt and cupped my breast. This is happening. Oh, God, this is happening now? Gabe. He nipped at my earlobe. Between his fingers toying with my nipple and his cock pressed against my lower back, I thought I might climax before he touched me below the waist. What are you doing? He licked the hollow behind my ear.
Trying to turn you on.
I shivered and reached back to caress his hip. It's working.
Good.
He felt as good as I'd remembered. In fact, he seemed to recall exactly how I liked to be touched and where. Gabe tugged my sweats.
Take these off.
I hesitated and he pinched my nipple hard enough to elicit a yelp.
Get out of your head.
I slid my pants and boy shorts over my hips and kicked them off. I tried to turn to face him, but he held me in place.
Not yet.
Before I could protest, he distracted me by tracing slow circles down, down, down my body until he'd zeroed in on his target. One touch and I forgot how to breathe. 2 more and I thought I'd spontaneously combust.
Like that, baby?
God, yes. I arched my back and wiggled, hoping he'd take the hint. But I need more. He released my breast and turned my face toward his.
You're so beautiful.
I parted my lips, and he wasted no time in claiming my mouth. The awkward position made the kiss seem more erotic, our tongues struggling in the space between us. I tried to turn in his arms, but he broke the kiss and tightened his grip. The pressure built inside me, and I knew it wouldn't be long before I came. At least, I hoped it wouldn't. It had been forever since I'd done this with another person. 4 years since he'd turned me into a puddle. My belly trembled against his forearm. So close, so damned close. He switched from circles to firm strokes, and my knees threatened to give out.
Let go, baby.
I can't. I hated the desperation in my voice, but I knew my body. The pleasure hung on the line between bliss and pain. Too sensitive, too intense, too everything for me to let go. Gabe turned me to face him and walked me backward to the bed. His gaze fixed on mine. He yanked his boxers down. I wanted to tell him I'd missed him, that I'd thought about this, about him, about us, but he pressed a finger to my lips.
If you talk, you'll think, and you'll second-guess yourself.
Grinning, I ran my tongue around the tip of his finger. Mags. He slid his hands under my thighs. Bending me in two, he pressed his cock against my entrance.
Is this what you want?
I nodded. Cursing under his breath, Gabe released my legs.
Do you have a condom?
Rather than speaking, I pointed toward the nightstand drawer.
Good girl.
He rewarded me with a grin. The man enjoyed taking charge in the bedroom as much as I enjoyed surrendering. A moment later, he poised himself over me again. This time, he wasted no time asking questions. He drew both my thighs up and buried himself inside me in one quick stroke. I saw stars. Pleasure and pain mixed together into a strong cocktail that left me intoxicated. Still sheathed inside me, he whispered, "More." I closed my eyes. Yes.
Look at me, beautiful.
Gabe set a leisurely rhythm. I watched the lines of his face sharpen with concentration. We'd had a lot of sex in our time together, and he'd rarely taken the slow and steady route. He had to be holding back for my benefit. Lying half on top of me, he released one thigh and buried his face in my hair.
You feel so damn good.
Please, I skimmed my nails down his back.
Please what, baby?
Stop being so careful. I thrust my hips against his. He sucked in a breath and increased his speed. Once again, the pressure built inside me. I wrapped my legs around him tight enough to restrict his movement, but he seemed to take it as a challenge and thrust harder.
Come for me,
Gabe growled into my ear. I obeyed. My entire body shook with the force of the orgasm. Keenly aware we had a child upstairs, I bit the inside of my mouth to keep from crying out. Before I could recover, Gabe pulled back and flipped me to my stomach. Tugging me to all fours, his fingers dug into my hips. I grasped the sheets until my knuckles paled from the effort. Once again, I lost myself somewhere between pleasure and pain. I hadn't felt alive since we'd broken up. Gabe slapped my ass hard enough to leave a handprint. The shock of it sent me over the edge again, and he followed. He collapsed beside me, but I couldn't bring myself to move. I laid still with my arms folded beneath my chest and my hands balled under my chin. He caressed my back. Smiling through the hair covering my face, I whispered, "Hi."
Hi.
He pulled me close and kissed my brow.
Did I hurt you?
A good kind of hurt. I buried my face in his chest. Gabe? He eased back until he could see my face. Can we do that again when we don't have any kids in the house?
Which part?
All of it. He chuckled and kissed me.
Yes, and often, on one condition. Marry me.
I'll think about it, but I need to sleep first. I nuzzled against him.
I love you, Maggie.
I love you too. If something went wrong, I'd blame this entire conversation on the post-orgasm hormones. But I did love him. And yes, I would marry him. One day.
Chapter 19. Gabe. Wednesday morning. The alarm screamed at 5:45. Exhausted, I reached to turn off the alarm and couldn't find it. The realization that I'd slept in a strange bed woke me quicker than an ice bath. I smelled a familiar perfume and reached behind me to find a curvy hip. Maggie. The way her sweet little body fit against mine made me smile, and the need to protect her overwhelmed me. She had a quiet strength about her, and a fragile heart I intended to nurture. Maggie hadn't accepted my proposal, but she hadn't said no. She would be mine. She had to be. Not because of my parents or money or to win a custody battle. Because we belonged together. As much as I hated to leave her, I had shit to do. I eased out of bed, doing my damnedest not to wake her, and grabbed my jeans. Still buttoning my fly, I stepped into the hall and ran into Zach. The kid was 13. He had to know what happened behind closed doors. Morning. I ran my hand over the back of my neck. Zach coughed.
Yeah, I need some cash for lunch.
I went into my room, pulled 2 20s from my wallet, and handed them to the kid.
That's enough for a month.
Zach gaped at the cash. Keep it. Take your girl out for ice cream after school. I'd bribed the kid into silence. So what?
She's pretty great, huh?
Zach grinned. You tell me. I haven't met her. He shook his head, seeming to enjoy having the upper hand.
No, I mean Maggie. She's great.
Oh, yeah. She's something special. Zach's expression hardened.
Look, you hurt her, and I'll hurt you. I might be a kid, and it might take years, but I will make you suffer.
I don't intend to hurt her. I clamped a hand on Zach's bony shoulder. Men take care of their women. Do you look after your sister like you look after Maggie? Zach shrugged.
I punched the kid down the street for making Chloe wreck her bike, but Maggie grounded me for a week.
Women don't understand these things. Besides, a week in your room with your Xbox and computer? Big deal.
No, man. She took all of it out, even the television.
I chuckled. Harsh, but your sister's worth it. He nodded and followed me into the kitchen.
I'm glad you're here.
Me too. Inspiration struck me at the oddest times. I had an idea, a good one, but I'd need his help. What do you think about playing a guitar accompaniment while your sister dances?
Depends. I can't exactly pull off Swan Lake on a six-string.
I'm thinking Clapton at the Mardi Gras Gala. I'll sing and play rhythm. The kid's eyes widened for a split second before he slipped back into teenaged indifference.
Yeah, that could work.
Cool. We'll need to start working on the piece. I rummaged through the pantry. I'm never up this early. What does she feed you guys for breakfast?
Ryan and Chloe eat oatmeal, or eggs and toast. Maggie makes them eat fruit, too.
The doorbell rang. The damn dog barked and hauled ass to the foyer and the window and back again. With one hand on Coco's collar, I opened the door and let Evelyn inside. Zach kissed his grandmother on the way out.
I gotta run. Early band practice. Bye, Zachary.
Evelyn smiled and handed me a bag of baby clothes.
I went shopping for Ella yesterday.
I set the fancy paper sack on the couch. I see that. She shoved a glass container of still warm food into my free hand.
I remembered you said you were getting the kids off to school this morning. I made you a frittata.
Thanks, Ma. I smiled, though I had my doubts the Munchkins would eat it.
It was no trouble. I wish I could stay and visit, but I have to get your father to Baton Rouge for a doctor appointment. Is everyone feeling better?
Yeah, it must have been a 24-hour virus. Maggie and Chloe are fine.
Good. Poor Chloe missing her recital.
I promised her we would hold a private performance. Could we do it at the gala?
She could dance at the wedding?
Very funny.
I'll inform the event planners my granddaughter will be dancing.
Could you find her a pink costume with wings?
Consider it done.
She patted my cheek and headed for the door. Drive safe, Ma. Following her, I grinned to keep the mood light and launched a verbal hand grenade. When will you call off the custody hearing?
When will you set a date?
It was too fucking early in the morning for this. Weddings take time to plan. She gave me the same look she'd given me when I was a kid trying to lie my way out of a beating.
I love you, but I'm not dropping the case until the two of you are married.
Don't be ridiculous. The hearing is tomorrow. It takes longer than that to get a marriage license.
Your lack of planning isn't my fault,
she smirked.
And there will be no running off to Vegas.
You should know. I plan to testify on Maggie's behalf.
We'll see what your father has to say about that.
Evelyn headed for her car. Cursing under my breath, I waved to my father. He motioned for me to come to the car. My mother, the good mafia wife, backtracked into the house.
I'll watch the kids.
Joe rolled down his window. There's a little matter of a loose-lipped and sticky-fingered employee I'd like you to take care of. I hung my head. Pops, It's not like you have to get your hands dirty. It's a call and a car ride. He set his jaw. You need to be there. Power only holds when our enemies know we are strong. A call to arrange someone's execution and a car ride to witness the murder. I have a family to consider. What happens to them if I go away? He barked out a laugh. We take care of our own. End of story. Get it done. My nod cost me a piece of my soul. I could only imagine what the actual deed would rob from me. I passed my mother on the way back inside, but couldn't meet her gaze. Sweet sounds of a waking baby came through the monitor. I snuck into my room to grab her before Ella realized she had a wet diaper and woke the rest of the house. Hey, sweet pea. Ella answered with an ear-piercing scream that turned her face from red to a strange shade of blue. Not now, honey, please, not now. I held her to my shoulder. Shit. Shh, shh, shh. It's okay, little one. After changing her, I returned to the kitchen to prepare a bottle. Holding her upright, I did a sort of bob and weave dance as I worked. Ryan came into the kitchen with a huge wet spot down the front and back of his pajamas.
I peed.
I see that. This is not my fucking day. I tilted my head and considered how to fix this with one hand. Can you take your clothes off by yourself? Ryan nodded and stripped quicker than I would have thought possible. I wrapped my free arm around the kid's waist and hoisted him into the kitchen sink. The little guy looked at me as if I'd lost my mind, but squatted like a quarterback waiting to receive the ball. I used the sprayer to hose down Ryan's butt and legs. Still holding the baby, I grabbed a dishcloth, patted him dry, and set him on the floor. Chloe stood near the kitchen door with her hands on her hips and a look of pure disgust on her face.
Gross!
I agree, but my options were limited. I popped the lid on my mother's frittata. Look what Grandma Evelyn dropped off. Both kids screwed up their faces. Ryan said,
It has green stuff.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? I'll figure something else out. I motioned toward the stairs. Go get dressed, little man. Chloe, sweetie, can you put Ryan's pajamas in the dish towel in the laundry room?
Ew, no way.
She shook her head.
I'd rather eat broccoli frittata than touch pee pants.
It's too freaking early for this. Struggling to function with one hand, I pulled a box of frozen waffles from the freezer and dropped 2 into the toaster. At least Ella had quieted down. She seemed amused by the chaos. Chloe pointed at the toaster.
Those are for Saturdays only.
Give me a break. I can't find the instant oatmeal. My niece's expression reminded me of Maggie's when I'd chugged milk from the carton. It seemed they both thought me a moron.
Because it's not instant.
She shook her head and went back to her bedroom. I considered the baby in my arms and frowned. I'd never thought about the difference between raising boys and girls. You better be a tomboy when you grow up. Ryan came back to the kitchen wearing a lot of clothes, none of which matched. Since the kid didn't have to leave the house, I didn't mention his choice of wardrobe. I poured syrup on the waffles and set the plate on the bar in front of Ryan. Remembering what Zach said about fruit, I added a banana. Ryan shrugged, picked up the waffle whole, and ate it like a piece of toast. Chloe returned with a brush and hair ties. She took one look at Ryan and rolled her eyes at me. What the hell did I do now? Obviously doubting my intelligence, she eyed me.
I need a bun today. I have dance class after school.
Okay, let's see. I buckled Ella into her carrier, tossed Ryan's wet pajamas into the laundry room, and washed my hands. The girl wrinkled her nose.
I'll go ask Aunt Maggie to do it.
I got it. Taking the brush from Chloe, I hesitated. I wore a ponytail on most days, but I never pulled someone else's hair back, let alone a bun. I brushed her long brown hair, secured it near the base of her skull. Chloe pulled a brown band from her wrist and handed it to me.
You have to twist it and put this around it.
I vaguely remembered Maggie doing something similar. I wound Chloe's hair until it coiled into a knot and stretched the second tie around the base. How's that? Chloe pressed her fingers against the messy bun and nodded.
It's good. Thank you.
Remember I told you we would do a private recital? She gave me a pirate smile.
Uh-huh.
Would you like to dance at Grandma Evelyn and Papa Joe's Mardi Gras party? Her mouth fell open.
The masked ball? Like Cinderella? Really? Can I stay and dance with the grown-ups after?
Anything you want, except a pumpkin carriage. I don't think I can pull that off. The little girl smirked.
Duh. Only princesses have fairy godmothers.
Peals of laughter filled the kitchen. The damn dog had pinned Ryan down and was licking the syrup from his face.
No, Coco, bad dog.
Chloe grabbed the mutt by her collar and pulled her off the boy. I picked Ryan off the floor and washed his face and hands with a clean dishcloth. Chloe, eat your waffles before they get cold. Ella started to fuss in her carrier and the house phone rang in the midst of the chaos. I snatched it from the wall. Holding the handset to my ear with my shoulder, I grabbed the baby formula out of the pantry. Hello?
You're engaged?
Chantal's voice drilled into my eardrum. Hang on. I motioned for Chloe to eat, put a pacifier in the baby's mouth, waited to make sure she didn't spit it out, and walked toward the garage.
Maggie Guthrie? Keeping it in the family, Gabe?
How the hell did she find out? I whispered through gritted teeth. How did you get this number?
Is this why you refuse to give me the money your family owes me?
Sign the papers, Chantal.
Screw that. I'm coming to get my daughter. I sucked in a breath and counted to 5. My lawyer had warned me not to argue with her until the judge approved the custody request. Then again, he'd also suggested I have her eliminated. I'm going to kill one. Why not kill 2? Hell, why not put a bullet in anyone who pissed me off? My father would be proud. Think about what's best for the baby. You love her? Chantal's voice dripped with sarcasm. Of course I love her. How can I not love my daughter? Not the baby. Do you love her? Yes, I do. And she's good with Ella. Please, sign the papers. Chantal laughed and disconnected. I walked back into the kitchen. Chloe frowned and set her dishes in the sink. Who are you yelling at? I didn't yell. She shrugged. Sounded like it to me. I checked the time. When does the bus come? 7:30. Standing at the end of the hall, Maggie looked from Ryan to the syrupy plate and finally at me. Who called?
Chapter 20. Maggie. I could excuse feeding the kids a sugary breakfast. Waffles were quick and easy. I could ignore the bag of frilly pink clothes that told me Evelyn had already come and gone. Heck, I could ignore Ryan wearing 6 outfits at once, but I couldn't handle the guilty expression on Gabe's face. Who called? No one. He turned and finished preparing Ella's bottle. Always the peacekeeper, Chloe interrupted. Look, Aunt Maggie, my Uncle Gabe put my hair in a bun. Very pretty. I smiled. It probably looked like a snarl. Hurry up. The bus will be here soon, and you still need to brush your teeth and get shoes on. I know, but it's hard to think about school when I have to plan my recital. She ran down the hall, giggling. I arched a brow at Gabe.
I promised her a one-woman show. Still working out the details.
Normally, I'd volunteer to help, but I couldn't add anything else to my list. Sounds great.
Feed the baby while I make coffee?
He asked with a hopeful lift in his voice. I thought about refusing until he answered my question, but that would only hurt Ella. I pulled the baby out of the carrier. Before you make coffee, get the porta-crib set up in the living room. It'll make things easier to have a safe place to put her down.
You bought a porta-crib?
It was Ryan's. I got tired of Coco eating Ella's pacifiers and brought it down from the attic. I took the bottle from him and offered it to the baby.
I would have done that.
He scratched the side of his head.
Where is it?
In the garage. Looks like a bag of golf clubs. I turned my attention to Ella. I'm ready. Chloe came back into the kitchen and wrinkled her nose. You might want to clean the sink. Uncle Gabe washed Ryan's pee off in it. I winced. Gross. Chloe threw her hands up. That's what I said. Despite my mood, I laughed and gave her a half hug. Do you want me to wait outside with you? Nah, I got it. Chloe kissed my cheek and Ella's head. She grabbed her bag and hurried to the garage. I listened as she told Gabe goodbye before she walked out front to catch the bus, alone. I didn't like it one bit. Chloe never went to the bus without me. Too many things had changed too quickly. Your phone's ringing, I called to Gabe.
Ignore it.
He disappeared around the corner with the porta-crib. I glanced at the screen and the room tilted. Chantal had called him. On a hunch, I checked the call log on the house phone. The same number appeared. How in the hell did Chantal get my number?
What time's your meeting?
Gabe took Ella from me and brushed his lying lips across mine. Okay, maybe he hadn't lied, but he hadn't shared all the pertinent information either. He had to have seen her or at least spoken to her. How else would she have my number? In a half hour. I need to run or I'll miss the ferry.
You okay?
He stacked dirty plates in the sink as if hiding the evidence would solve the problem.
I can drive you to the quarter. I have to pick up last night's receipts from the bar.
You have your hands full. Want me to get them while I'm out?
Thanks. I'll let Jesse know you're stopping by.
He turned his attention to the breakfast plates.
Have a good one.
Yep, see you tonight. Even elbow deep in dishwater, the man made my pulse race. He lied to me, and all I want to do is jump his bones? I need a therapist. I'd speed-walked 3 blocks to the ferry terminal when my phone rang. Figuring it was Gabe, I answered without checking the screen. Big mistake. Hello?
Good morning, Maggie.
My mouth went dry. I hadn't spoken to Justin since meeting his wife. Why are you calling me?
To congratulate you on your engagement. I didn't realize the guy at the bar was Gabe Marchionni.
What? I pressed a hand to my chest and stepped off the curb. Justin replied, but screeching tires and a blaring horn drowned out his words. Unable to make sense of what had just happened, I stared at the cursing driver several heartbeats before crossing the street.
They're loaded. I had to go to the hospital for my jaw. Medical bills, pain, payment. He owes me.
I disconnected the call and hurried to board the ferry. I had enough on my plate without worrying about Justin Trudeau. Shauna waved as I approached the cafe. Not that I needed any help spotting my best friend. Her hair was bright purple and cut in short layers that stuck out in all directions. I envied her. Shauna had something I desperately wished I'd had. Self-confidence. Hey, love the new look. I embraced her a little too tight. Thanks. I wanted something different. It'll be great for Fat Tuesday. She pulled away and gave me a quick once-over. Everything good? Everything's great. I groaned to myself. My least favorite thing about living in New Orleans had to be Mardi Gras. But I'll be working in a bar during that craziness. Are you still doing that? What happened to the magazine? It's field research. I raised the menu to hide my expression. Shauna pulled it down. I hate to ruin your morning, but did you see the announcement in the paper? Little did she know my morning already sucked. What announcement? She lowered her voice. Your engagement announcement. My heart fell into my shoes. It's in the paper? Shauna handed me her phone. For the second time that day, my world tilted on its axis. I stared at a photo of me and Gabe with our names along with the word engaged, printed in bold beneath it. The picture had been taken years before when we were dating, the perfect image of a happy, betrothed couple. Oh, God. Shauna set the cell on the table between us. What's going on? You said the engagement was a misunderstanding. Yes and no, but I didn't leak it to the paper. Is this how Chantal found out about us? Had she gotten my number from someone other than Gabe? Had Justin seen it? Was that why he called? Yes and no? Either you are or you aren't. She sat back and folded her arms. It's complicated. Everything's complicated with that family. Shauna rolled her eyes. I need info for the article, plus he's going to get Evelyn and Joe to drop the custody case. You're going through with the article? Her eyes widened. I could count on one hand the number of times I'd seen Shauna look frightened, and for some reason this was one of them. Marlena approved my proposal to do an expose about the Marchionni family and their businesses. Like I said before, are you nuts? Evelyn already wants you dead so she can have the kids, and let's not forget you're engaged to Gabe. She doesn't want me dead. I laughed, but it sounded hollow. Not yet. If you start airing their dirty laundry to the world, things could get worse. When's the custody hearing? Tomorrow? I'd done my best to trust Gabe when he'd said he'd get his parents to back off, but so far nothing had changed. Prince Charming better get his ass in gear. Evelyn and Papa Joe are the last people who need to be raising kids. Tell that to the judge. My phone lit with another call from a blocked number. I answered and listened for half a heartbeat before I hung up. I really didn't need to know all the body parts the person wanted to cut off me. Shauna touched my hand. You okay? Not even a little okay. I'm fine. Wrong number. I hate to add to your shitty morning. She pulled an envelope from her bag. You need to take a look at this before you go any further with the article or into court. Is it that bad? Shauna shrugged. That's your call. I opened the thick file and began skimming through personal and business records of the Marchionni family. My eyes bugged out at the size of the dollar figures. I knew they had money, but holy smokes. You got the police report too? Sure did. There are several clipped together. Barely paying attention, I flipped through the pages until a familiar name caught my eye. I glanced at Shauna, then back at the police report. Rebecca. Don't read anything into it. The authorities ruled the crash an accident, Shauna said. I know. I swallowed past the lump in my throat and closed the folder. Bad news piled upon more bad news. I'll read it later. What's your gut saying? Is the family as bad as the rumors say? Shauna took a sip of coffee. Ask me again after you've had time to go through it all. You think they're part of some organized crime syndicate. Her usual carefree expression melted into a frown. Maybe. It's hard to tell. Whatever they are, people they do business with don't seem happy afterwards. How so? I eyed the file with a sinking feeling. Several reports have been filed against the corporation and more against Papa Joe, accusing them of sabotaging businesses in order to force owners to sell. Shit. With that many enemies, it's not surprising he insisted someone caused Joe and Rebecca's crash. I refused to consider what something like that could mean for Gabe, or me and the kids if we were married. This has to be a mistake. She's exaggerating. I'll be judicious with the information I include in the article. Besides, maybe I can dig up enough dirt to stop the custody battle. I mean, if the engagement thing doesn't work out. Maybe. Shauna didn't seem convinced. She sat back in her chair. What's really up with you and Gabe? I raised my menu again. Shauna snatched it from me and tossed it on an empty table. You slept with him. My face heated. I wouldn't say we slept. I can't believe you let him talk you into sex again. It's bad enough he has you hooked into an engagement of convenience. Shauna looked as if she'd chugged a half-gallon of soured milk. He's changed. At least I thought he'd changed until Chantal had called my house. Oh, I bet he has. Have you forgotten the part where he dug your heart out with a spoon and pissed on it? Shauna waved the waiter away, leaning closer to me again. You cried for months. Weeks, I lied. In reality, I'd cried off and on over Gabe until he'd walked back into my life. I haven't forgotten. We're in a strange situation. We sort of need each other. The rest will sort itself out in time. I'll tell you what he needs. A good swift kick in the balls. Shauna smirked. Tell me about the sex. I sat my elbows on the table and smiled. He hasn't lost his touch. The waiter reappeared before the conversation got too raunchy. I'll have the beignets. Smiling, I handed him the menu. Creole omelet, home fries, and a side of bacon. Shauna turned back to me and narrowed her eyes. I lowered my gaze and fidgeted with my napkin. I knew it. You're marrying him for the orgasms. She laughed loud enough for several people to turn in our direction. What happened to the vibrator I gave you for your birthday? I wanted to hide under the table, but it was no use and she'd probably follow me. People are watching us. She turned and glared at the onlookers. Thankfully, I knew how to get Shauna off the subject of Gabe. How's your dating life? Non-freaking existent. After the last debacle, I pulled my profile off the dating sites. I've decided to live a celibate life. Focus on work. I want my PI license. She drummed her fingers on the table. I could take the course now. It's only 40 hours. You should. We had this conversation many times before, but she'd always chickened out at the last minute. I'd have more credibility with clients if I finished my degree. Shauna lowered her voice. All I have left is the English and math courses. With my dyslexia, I can get help with the reading and writing. Would you tutor me in math? Of course. I hated math more than I hated the extra weight I carried in my hips and the fact that I had pimples and wrinkles at the same time, but I'd do anything for her. God knows she's done worse for me. Thanks, Maggie. I'm hoping to get into classes this fall. The waiter delivered our food, but I ignored the powdered sugar-coated balls of deliciousness. Why aren't you eating? Shauna eyed me. I'm too stressed out. Bullshit. You're the definition of a stress eater. Tell me you aren't starving yourself for that asshole. Most of the time I treasured having a friend who knew me inside and out, but not when it came to my weight. I'm not. Chloe and I had a stomach virus over the weekend. I took one look at the beignet and felt queasy. Stay on your side of the table. Shauna stole a beignet from my plate. Now that I have the Marchionni stuff wrapped up, I'll start working on Gabe's baby mama. I'd all but decided to tell her not to investigate Chantal, but the more I thought about it, the more I convinced myself I needed to know. He'd lied about the call, and I suspected it wasn't the first time. I know that look. She grabbed my hand. Tell me you're not falling in love with him again. I would, but you'd see right through me. Shauna muttered a slew of curses that would make a pirate blush. It gets worse. Chantal called my house and he lied about it. I blurted it out before I thought the better of it. That son of a bitch, he's already cheating on you? I'd always heard of eyes flashing red when someone was angry, but until that moment I thought it was BS. Shauna was about to lose her mind. No, I mean, when does he have time? Maybe she saw the announcement in the paper? My best friend in the world gave me a look that told me I'd skyrocketed to the top of her shit list right beside Gabe. I checked the time and sucked down the rest of my coffee. I'm late. I have to swing by the bar before I head to the office. Go. I'll get the check. Shauna folded her arms. Just don't do anything else stupid. I'll try. I made a show of walking fast until I was out of view of the cafe. Other than the occasional deadline, I had no clock to punch. I didn't really need to go into the office, except I wanted to check up on a few things. And I needed a public place to read the file Shauna had given me. Sure, I could do it at home, but I'd cry less if surrounded by professional journalists. Or so I hoped. Chapter 21. Maggie. The conversation with Shauna had shaken me, but being back in the French Quarter rattled me to my core. I used to love Jackson Square, with its tarot readers and fun shops. I'd been baptized and taken my first communion at St. Louis Cathedral, but I hadn't set foot inside the building since my sister and brother-in-law's funerals. I would have loved to light a candle for them, but I had too much to do. Plus, I kept getting this creepy, crawly sensation between my shoulder blades, and the hair on the back of my neck stood on end. The prank caller's words pinged around in my skull to the point of paranoia. Was someone following me? I'd seen enough movies to know better than to keep looking over my shoulder, but I couldn't help myself. No one stood out as particularly menacing in the crowd, nor did I notice the same people twice. That's it, I'm losing my mind. Thankfully, the bar was only a couple of blocks from the cafe. I punched the security code on the back door and poked my head into the break room. A woman stood with her back to the door, reading the notices on the bulletin board. I cleared my throat. Can I help you? Oh, sorry. I know I'm not supposed to be back here, but the side door was open. I was looking for the owner. She smiled a smile that reminded me of a news anchor. Pretty, but pretend. The owner's working from home today. I'd seen her here before, though I didn't know her name. Were you looking at the job postings? After a brief silence, she nodded. Are you still hiring? I think so, but you'll need to speak to Jessie. Thanks, I will. She turned for the door. I'll show you out. No need. I followed her anyway. Something about the conversation felt off, besides the fact she'd let herself into a closed bar. Why would a leggy blonde be waiting here for Gabe like they had a standing Wednesday morning date? Once I locked the door behind her, I headed for the office. Jessie glanced up from her paperwork and removed her earbuds. Hey, didn't hear you come in. I motioned behind me like an idiot. How had she been here the entire time and not realized someone had wandered in? There was a woman in the break room. Her eyes widened. When? Just now? She said the side door was unlocked. I didn't know Jessie well, but she'd never struck me as the careless type. I came in through the employee entrance about an hour ago. I haven't been up front, and I know I locked the doors last night. She ran her hands over her arms. I'll make sure nothing's missing. Do me a favor and don't mention this to Gabe. The family's already given him grief about me working here. By the family, I assumed she meant Papa Joe. The man was a notorious misogynist. Want me to stick around and make sure everything's okay? I'm expecting a friend any minute. She blushed and handed me a folder labeled receipts. He brings me coffee on weekdays. Your secrets are safe with me. I tucked the file into my bag. There are some things that one simply should not see by the light of day. Bourbon Street is one of them. I ignored the gaudy strip clubs and piles of garbage, but I couldn't help doing some quick window shopping at a couple of the sex shops. What can I say? Living with Gabe had woken my dormant hormones. My skin prickled, and the sensation that someone was watching me returned. I ducked my head and picked up my pace. Every block or so, I glanced over my shoulder, but no one stood out. I turned the corner on Poydras Street and ducked beneath the awning of a souvenir shop. A man in a leather jacket followed, made eye contact, and continued on his way. He looked back at me twice, but smiled each time. Is he following me or flirting? I blew it off as paranoia after the conversation with Shauna and walked the rest of the way to the NOLA Society News offices. I didn't have an office or know many of the employees milling about, but no one questioned my presence. The badge hanging from my lapel gave me the right to use the research computers with access to many of the city record databases. My first search turned up general information about the Marchionni Corporation. I took notes on their holdings and the members of the board of directors. Next, I conducted individual searches on each of the properties owned by Gabe's brothers and jotted down names associated with the businesses. I'd become so engrossed in my work that I didn't hear my boss approaching until Marlena set a hand on my shoulder. I jumped out of my chair. You scared the stuffing out of me. I've been practicing my stealth moves. Marlena cackled and met my gaze. You should have told us you captured one of New Orleans' sexiest bachelors. It killed me to read it in the competition. I didn't place the announcement in the Picayune. My cheeks heated. I had a good idea who'd leaked the story and fully intended to have a word with my would-be mother-in-law. As for the engagement, it's complicated. If I was in your shoes, I'd march that man down the aisle so quick he'd need a seatbelt and helmet. Marlena leaned in and gave me a half hug. Though many women are mourning his loss, myself included. Congratulations. I couldn't help but smile. Thanks. You should know my relationship with Gabe won't affect the piece. Of course it will, but given your personal relationship, I trust you'll come up with something that's a different flavor of delicious. She leaned forward to read the screen. I'm not changing my tactics. The piece will be honest and, from the looks of it, gritty. Marlena's frown started in her eyes and worked its way down her face. Did you find something? Not yet, but I have a private source who's doing some digging into financial records. I'm focusing on identifying the key players outside the family. I closed Shauna's file to keep Marlena's eagle eyes off the police report. Smart. If there are dirty secrets, you're more likely to find them on the periphery. But are you certain you want to go this route? Absolutely. I also took a part-time job in a Marchionni establishment. Marlena's perfectly shaped brow rose. Oh? I thought it would be interesting to get an insider's perspective, see what their employees have to say about the men behind the myths. She pursed her lips and glanced over the bank of computers. Maggie, given the circumstances, you should use a pseudonym on this piece. If it turns out to be more than the typical story, I'm going to sell it to the highest bidder. You'll want anonymity. I appreciate that, if not for Gabe's sake, then for my sister's children. You're a talented young woman, too talented to be writing fluff for a local magazine. If you ever decide to spread your wings, I hope you know I would write you one hell of a reference letter. Ah, yes, the old follow your dreams speech. What was it with people using it while trying to get rid of me? It stung, and that pissed me off. If I'm so talented, why were you about to fire me not too long ago? Marlena tilted her head. To force you to come up with something new, or to push you into looking for a position that will challenge you. Thanks, but I have all the challenges I need right now. If she only knew. Being engaged to Gabe Marchionni will do that. She winked and walked away. I waited until she disappeared around the corner and opened Shauna's file. An hour later, I'd created a list of over 20 known associates of the Marchionni family who'd been convicted of crimes ranging from racketeering to RICO violations to murder. Another dozen or so associates had died violent deaths or were missing. I flipped to the police reports concerning my sister's death. Page after page of descriptions of the scene, my sister and brother-in-law, the car, crushed bodies, severed brake lines, broken lives. One name caught my attention, Chantal Dubois. Papa Joe named her as a disgruntled business partner, but the woman had an alibi for the night of the accident. Papa Joe believed someone had murdered them. The reports all but agreed, and yet the police had ruled it an accident. By the time I'd finished reading, I knew two things for certain. I needed to find out who was making the threatening phone calls, and I needed to talk to Gabe.
Chapter 22. Gabe. After my disastrous morning, I'd called in reinforcements. Hildy, mine and my brother's former nanny, arrived within the hour, which freed me up to do my father's bidding. I glanced at the man sitting next to me, a man about to take his last breath. "Please, if I could explain." Artie Guzman, accountant at the Marchionni Corporation for the previous 6 years, smelled like tuna fish and cheap cologne. I'd never done this sort of thing, but I'd hung around people who had since I'd started sprouting pubic hair. Tough guys, the kind you wouldn't want to sit next to on a bus, who seldom spoke and rarely smiled. The type of man I never wanted myself or my brothers to become. I clenched my jaw and stared straight ahead. Artie Guzman had no wife or kids or family other than 2 prize-winning poodles. I knew this because he'd reached for his wallet to show me a picture of his dogs a split second before my father's go-to guy broke Artie's fingers. "I didn't mean anything by it. It was a joke in the break room. Accountant humor." His voice warbled between terror and laughter. "I didn't steal anything." Every criminal sang the "I didn't do it" tune, but this felt different. I believed him. It took serious balls to steal from a man like my father. Artie Guzman didn't seem the type. The thug beside him slammed his fist into Artie's jaw hard enough to break bone. Blood and spit splattered across my $600 Ralph Lauren dress shirt. I focused on a drop of crimson on the back of the seat in front of me and thought about Maggie. Her smile, her laugh, her hair. Then I thought about my father and his possible motives for ordering this murder. Was Guzman a pawn in Papa Joe's plan to rope me into the business? The driver came to a stop. No longer able to speak, Artie's moans turned to howls. I glanced at my phone. An image of Maggie and Ella smiled at me from the screen. Dear God, I can't allow this. "You ready, boss?" My father's guy stepped out and tugged the accountant toward him. I stepped from the car. Humid Louisiana air and the musty odor of swamp hit me like a freight train. I squared my shoulders and walked to the back bumper. I had the beginnings of a plan, but I had no way of knowing how the other men would react. "Stay here. I'll handle this alone." The large man arched a skeptical brow. "He's bleeding. I'll drag him down to the river for you. No sense in ruining your fancy clothes." I motioned for him to get on with it. Artie went, but he didn't go quietly. I wondered if I'd behave the same way in his shoes. I would like to think I'd have more dignity, but no one knew how they'd react to being kidnapped and dragged to their death. The thug shoved Mr. Guzman to his knees in the soggy earth, turned, and handed me his gun. "I'll be in the car." I'd held firearms before, but the weight of this one sent a chill down my spine. "Please." Artie's stare bore into me. I glanced over my shoulder to make sure my father's guy had gone and squatted beside the accountant. "I'm not going to hurt you, but I need some assurances." The man's swollen eyes widened. "Thank you. Yes, anything." "You have to disappear. Today. Don't go home. You have to run and never return." He nodded, but I could almost see the wheels turning in his head. "My dogs?" "I'll make sure they're taken care of until you've found a place." Making a mental note to call Leo about the poodles, I pulled out my wallet and handed him a few $100 along with my personal card. "Call me from a new number when you're safely outside the city. I'll get you enough money to start over, but you have to stay gone. Got it?" Artie stared at the black embossed card with my name and cell phone number. "Yeah, yes, thank you." "Wait here until you're sure we've gone." He nodded again. "Screw this up, and we're both dead." I fired 2 shots into the water before walking back to the car. "Thanks again. If this doesn't convince her to hire a nanny, I don't know what will." I hugged Hildy for the 3rd time. Not because I loved and appreciated her, which I did, but because I desperately needed to return to some sense of normalcy. I'd taken a huge risk letting Guzman go, and I prayed I wouldn't live to regret it.
Mm-hmm.
Hildy patted my cheek. Her gaze fell to the blood on my shirt, but she glanced away without comment. Smart woman. I didn't know what to say. She'd scrubbed every inch of the house, somehow removed the long-dead Christmas tree, and made supper in the time it had taken me to oversee my first would-be murder.
I left contact information on the counter for a woman I know who's looking for a nanny position. She's a good, God-fearing soul and will care for the children like they're her own.
I'll give her a call. I folded my arms and rocked on the balls of my feet, a habit I thought I'd lost once I'd hit puberty. Spending time with Hildy made me feel like I was 8 years old again. Only this time, I felt like an 8-year-old who'd almost done the unspeakable. I waited until she pulled away, waved, and walked back into the house, and into what smelled like a sewer. Ella tensed and turned red from the top of her head to her tiny toes. I groaned. You couldn't have done that 5 minutes ago. The baby's mouth hung open a solid 5 seconds before she worked up the wail, but when she did, I shot into action. I grabbed a diaper and the wipes and settled the infant on the changing table I'd pulled out of the attic. A car door shut outside, but the dog didn't bark. It had to be Maggie. I stripped out of the ruined shirt and shoved it under the bed. The front door closed.
Gabe?
I'm changing Ella. Maggie came down the hall but stopped before she came in the room.
Can we talk?
Sure, give me a sec. You don't want to come in here. She's toxic. I glanced over my shoulder and stilled. Maggie didn't look happy.
I'll be in my room.
Oh boy, not now, not today. I finished diaper duty, settled Ella into her crib, and went to find Maggie. Rough day? She shrugged.
Can we talk a minute?
What's up, gorgeous? I sat on the edge of the bed.
How are the kids?
I had the feeling she hadn't asked me in here to talk about the kids. I had a situation that had to be dealt with in the office. I had Hildy come sit with them. Maggie sighed and dipped her chin to her chest.
This isn't working.
Where the hell is this coming from? I thought we were good.
We're far from good.
She shook her head and stood.
Since you got here, everything is different. Someone put an engagement announcement in the paper. My boss and most of New Orleans saw it. You seduce me, sleep in my bed, make me nuts with your stupid grins and compliments, and the kids are getting too attached. I think you need to go.
I listened to everything she had to say. By the time she quieted, I had to unclench my jaw to speak. My turn? She shrugged. I don't want to leave. My voice cracked. She stared as if waiting for me to say more, but I'd cut through all of the bullshit and said what I needed to. Unfortunately, Maggie disagreed. The woman exploded.
That's it? That's all you have to say? Of course you don't want to leave. Too bad, Gabe. We don't always get what we want.
Ah, there it is. I stood.
There what is?
I knew better than to argue with her when she was like this, but that didn't stop me. You're pissed because I screwed up your perfectly planned out life.
What plan? I haven't had a plan since Rebecca and Joe died.
She tilted her head and studied me like I was one of her books. I had no intention of going anywhere for long, but we both needed time to cool off. I'll leave if that's what you want, but don't lie to me or yourself.
It's true.
Maggie's voice cracked.
I have no idea what I'm doing with the house or the kids or you.
I lowered my voice. Do you want to know why I ended things with you? She stared at her hands.
I remember every word you said to me, but go ahead and tell me again.
You had a plan for everything. I couldn't figure out where I fit into it. You didn't want kids. I want a house full. You wanted to live in New York. I live here.
That's crap. I loved you. It killed me when you threw me away with the whole you deserve a chance to follow your dreams routine. I always thought you'd found someone else, that you'd woken up and realized I wasn't good enough for you.
My mouth fell open. How could she be so wrong? She acted as if we'd lived through 2 different relationships. Sure, I'd ended things, but I'd always regretted it. There has never been anyone else for me.
Then why did you never return my calls?
I thought it'd be easier for you. A clean break.
No, Gabe. It was easier for you. She turned her back to me. I was 21 and stupid. I had big dreams, but I would have changed them for you.
And I was 26 and loved you too much to ask you to do that. I swallowed past the lump in my throat. I've never stopped loving you.
You honestly expect me to believe that? I've been back in New Orleans for a year. You never called or stopped by. Not until you needed something from me.
It killed me knowing you were so close and hurting, but I couldn't see you.
Why? What was stopping you?
I couldn't tell her, not without telling her everything. Today wasn't the day for it, not after what had happened in the swamp. I had no choice.
Let me guess, your father forbade you? Why? Because he thought someone murdered my sister?
She stalked to her computer bag, pulled out a stack of folded-up papers, and threw them on the bed.
There's the police report. But it's wrong, isn't it?
Fuck me. This is what this is about? I can't get into this with her. Not now. Not like this. It didn't take a degree in female psychology to figure out that none of the shit she'd said up until that point had anything to do with her telling me to leave. That was all ancient history. But this business with her sister was an entirely different animal. Maggie. The police ruled,
I want the truth.
She balled her hands.
Was it a mob hit?
My brain stuttered. I'd always known she'd figure it out, but I found myself ill-prepared to explain the situation. Instead, I dodged. Why would you ask me that?
What did Chantal have to do with it?
Nothing. Before I could explain, Maggie continued the barrage.
Was my sister murdered?
I don't know for sure what caused Joe and Rebecca's accident. None of us do. But you're right. My father assigned a security detail on the kids and ordered us to stay away. She folded in on herself.
I want you out of this house.
A stone wall rose between us. Even the temperature in the room grew a few degrees cooler. As much as I wanted to reach out to her, I couldn't. If she reacted to the truth about my family like she had the accident, Maggie would have yet another target on her back. Call it self-preservation or cowardice, but I needed a break. I took a breath and forced myself to speak in a professional tone. I'm going to check on the kids. We'll finish the conversation when we've both calmed down.
It won't make a difference,
Maggie sighed. I ignored her and walked into the living room.
Uncle Gabe?
Chloe ran toward me and wrapped her arms around my waist. Hey, Munchkin, when did you get home? I knelt to put myself at eye level with her.
A little bit ago. Why were you and Aunt Maggie arguing?
She set one hand on each of my cheeks and pressed her brow to mine until our noses touched. I'd never felt like such an asshole. I'd blown it. I never should have let things get so heated. Grown-ups do that sometimes.
Are you leaving us and going back to heaven?
My heart shattered like tempered glass, only sharper. Is that where you think I've been? She nodded.
I thought you went with Mommy and Daddy to heaven. You didn't come back after the funeral, except at Christmas, like an angel or something.
My throat began to close before I could swallow back my emotions. Maggie had been right about one thing. These kids had suffered enough loss for 2 lifetimes. I refused to add to their pain. Here's the thing. Once you go to heaven, you can't come back. If I went there, I wouldn't be able to visit you or your brothers. Your mom and dad are doing fine up there with the angels. I think I'll hang around here and look after you guys for a while, okay?
Okay.
Chloe smiled, showing teeth that looked too big for her mouth.
I like having you here. It's almost like having my daddy back.
I stood and she slid her hand into mine. Chloe was the spitting image of Rebecca, except her eyes. She had the same green eyes as me and my brothers. I'd always loved her, but in that moment, I wanted her to be mine. Maggie sniffled from the hall. I nodded in her direction and spoke to Chloe. I need to talk to Aunt Maggie real quick. Can you go keep an eye on Ryan? Chloe gave me a knowing look and nodded. If I didn't know better, I would have sworn she had played me. The girl skipped through the kitchen and headed upstairs. Judging from the look on her face, Maggie's mood hadn't improved. She folded her arms. I closed the distance and lowered my voice. I'm staying. The hell you are. Did you know Chloe thought I died and went to heaven with Joe and Becca? Maggie's eyes widened. I stayed away too long. Leaning closer, I whispered, I'm not going to walk away from them again. It's a big house. We can both behave like adults until we figure things out. And if I say no? You won't, because you would walk through fire for those kids. It'll hurt them if I leave. I'd played dirty, but I didn't give a shit. Maggie chewed her bottom lip. You're only prolonging the inevitable. Honey, I don't walk out on my commitments. I may not have planned to be Ella's father or a stand-in dad to Joe's 3, but I am. Like it or not, we love each other, and we're going to work this out. She frowned, but for once in her life, she didn't have anything to say. I shoved my hands in my pockets to keep from reaching for her. Go wash your face. We're going to sit down and eat dinner at the table like a normal family. The kids deserve that much. Maggie nodded and walked down the hall. One thing had gone my way the entire fucking day. Chapter 23. Gabe. Courtrooms and churches had the same smell. Wood soap, old papers, and desperation. I placed my hand on Maggie's knee to stop it from shaking the table. We've got this. We didn't have this. Not with her representing herself. Not if my father had bought the judge. But I had to believe it would work out in the end. She nodded, but her gaze slid past me to my parents and their attorney. I put my face in her sightline. Don't look at them. Focus on me. Her eyes danced back and forth like her knee had moments before. Even in her current state, her beauty quickened my pulse. But her inner strength humbled me. There were plenty of pretty faces in the world, but precious few could match my girl when it came to courage. She was the total package, the real deal, the whole enchilada. Maggie! Zach Whisper shouted from the first row of the gallery. She turned toward the kids. He gave her a thumbs up. Don't worry, you've got this. We love you. I may not have had a part in making him, but I'd never been prouder of the kid. He sat tall between his sister and baby brother and held each of their hands. You got this! Ryan pumped his fist. Nadine shushed the kids and moved to Maggie's side. Mary Margaret, you must sit up. No judge will give custody to someone who slouches. I'd never wanted to smack a woman more in my life, but this wasn't the time, and it certainly wasn't the place. Thank you, Nadine. Maybe you could keep your comments to yourself until after this is over? Maggie gasped, but her mother took the freaking hint and sat her ass down. Thankfully, the judge came into the courtroom before Maggie had a chance to chastise me for calling Nadine out. I risked a glance toward my parents. Evelyn stared straight ahead, but my father met my gaze. His blazer hung loose on his shoulders and dark circles shadowed his eyes. He needed to be home with his feet up, not in a courtroom listening to family drama. This is LA 07337 in the matter of Evelyn Marchionni and Mary Margaret Guthrie. I understand the petitioner filed a motion for the children to be interviewed during the formal proceedings. Motion denied. Maggie exhaled a breath. Santiago whispered something to my mother, who nodded. Neither appeared happy by the judge's decision. But what did they expect? Putting the kids on the stand and making them choose between their grandparents and Maggie would have been traumatic for everyone. The judge flipped through several pages before glancing up. I will send the children out of the courtroom during the formal proceedings. Santiago shot to his feet. The judge's order seemed to have surprised him. Will you interview the children after the hearing, or simply review their affidavits? Affidavits? The color drained from Maggie's cheeks. She leaned close and whispered, When did Evelyn get affidavits? No clue. I turned and glared at my mother. Yes, Section 770.04 states the court, in its discretion, may consider the wishes of a child to his guardian. This is to ensure neither party had unduly influenced the child's testimony. He eyed my parents and then Maggie. Not that I'm suggesting this happened here. Thank Christ. I eased back in my chair and stared at my father. Whether he'd tried and failed or had been bullshitting me, he hadn't gotten the judge in his pocket. Maggie stood.
Your Honor, I was not given copies of the children's affidavits by opposing counsel, nor was I aware of their existence.
The judge nodded. Another reason for the court to interview the children in chambers. The transcripts of the recordings will be sealed. Neither party will be given a chance to review the statements. Nadine and the children followed an official-looking woman from the room. Maggie slumped into the chair but seemed to remember her mother's words and sat ramrod straight. I took her hand under the table, but had to release it when we were sworn in. I'd only been to court once in my life. I had been 12 and Leo had been 11. We'd been up on shoplifting charges for stealing a couple of boxes of candy out of the back of a delivery truck. The experience had scared me shitless, much like today's proceedings. The judge motioned to Santiago. Counselor, are you ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to call Gabriel Marchionni to the stand.
My mouth went dry. I turned to Maggie, who looked as stunned as I felt. The judge said, Mr. Marchionni, please take the stand. I walked forward, though I had no idea how my feet had moved, considering my brain had gone into convulsions. I stated and spelled my name and verified that I'd sworn in.
Mr. Marchionni, you are currently cohabitating with Miss Guthrie, are you not?
I glanced to the judge as if he'd saved me. He nodded. Yes.
Would you describe your sleeping arrangements?
That fucker. I narrowed my eyes at Santiago, but I knew how this worked. My mother had put him up to this. I sleep in the master bedroom. My infant daughter sleeps in a crib 2 feet from the bed.
And do you sleep alone in the bed?
Yes.
Does Chloe, the 9-year-old, ever sleep with you?
Sal had the good sense to avoid my eyes. I took a breath and counted to 5. This is how they wanted to play it? My niece and youngest nephew have nightmares about their deceased.
If you could answer the question, Mr. Marchionni. The court is aware the children's parents are deceased. Otherwise, we would not be here.
I glanced at Maggie. Big mistake. She'd gone as white as a marshmallow and looked like she'd melt into the floor at any moment. The kids come into my room once, maybe twice a week. They miss their parents.
Has Chloe ever come into your room alone?
No.
Have you ever slept in her bed?
No. I stared at my mother until she glanced away. Santiago cleared his throat.
Could you tell the court the state of the household bills when you first moved into Miss Guthrie's home?
How the hell did he know? My bank account. My fucking mother was on my account. She'd insisted in case something happened to me. The bills were current, with the exception of the electric. It was 1 month past due.
What about the mortgage? Was it current?
I smiled for the first time since I'd walked into the room. He'd screwed up, and I planned to take full fucking advantage of it. There is no mortgage on the house. My brother owned it free and clear.
You mean the Marchionni Corporation owns the house and privately financed a mortgage to Miss Guthrie after your brother passed away?
I turned to the judge. My folks insist we keep all of the family assets under the business name for tax purposes. My brother paid off the note on the house. Maggie, Miss Guthrie, wanted to pay something for rent so no one would accuse her of profiting from her sister's death. Santiago stood with his back to my parents and winked at me. He'd given me a gift, and we both knew it.
I have nothing further.
The judge said, Miss Guthrie, do you have any questions for the witness?
I do, Your Honor.
She stood and moved from behind the table.
Mr. Marchionni, would you tell the court where Chloe thought you'd been over the previous 14 months?
I stared at my father. She thought I'd gone to heaven with her mom and dad. Evelyn gasped and pressed her hand to her chest.
And why is that?
Maggie glanced back at her soon-to-be mother-in-law. My father urged my brothers and me to stay away from the children. She went back to her table, grabbed a stack of papers, and handed them to the clerk.
Your Honor, I'd like to submit the police reports from Giuseppe Marchionni Jr. and Rebecca Guthrie Marchionni's automobile accident.
Santiago stood.
The reports are already in evidence.
Not these, Your Honor. I've secured the preliminary notes and handwritten reports from the responding officers, as well as phone logs detailing Giuseppe Marchionni Sr.'s concerns about the accident.
My parents and Santiago huddled together and whispered. The judge cleared his throat and motioned to the clerk. "I'll accept Miss Guthrie's documents." She turned back to me. "Why would a grandfather demand uncles not to visit grieving children?" My father met my eyes as if daring me to answer. What could I do? I was under oath, and the truth was spelled out in the reports. He insisted my brother and sister-in-law were murdered. Despite the police findings? Yes. Maggie cocked her head. Would you say your father's actions were warranted? I rolled my lips in. She'd pushed a little too far. I don't know. Would you say he was acting paranoid? Santiago's voice rang out. I object. The witness isn't a trained professional. I withdraw the question. Maggie sighed. Mr. Marchionni, would you characterize our relationship for the court? I glanced from her to the judge and grinned. Miss Guthrie and I are engaged to be married, and I can assure you, we will not miss another electric bill.
Chapter 24. Maggie. Where did all of this baby equipment come from? It looks like Babies R Us threw up in here. Shauna stood with her hands on her hips, surveying the cluttered living room. Most of it came from the attic. I eased Ella into the swing, pressed a few buttons, and gave the contraption a gentle nudge. She's cranky today, but this'll put her to sleep. I hate to admit it, but she's flippin' adorable. Shauna plopped down on the sofa. Where's Prince Charming? Work. I hovered near Ella until her eyes drooped. Shauna had called to say she was dropping by an hour after we'd walked out of the courthouse. I still hadn't processed everything that had happened. I know that look. What's wrong? How did it go today? I sat beside her. Good, I think. They tried to make Gabe out to be some sort of pervert for allowing Chloe and Ryan to sleep in his bed. Shauna's brows disappeared behind her bangs. Those assholes! He's their son. I waved her off. He set them straight. Told the judge about the kids missing their parents, explained away my money trouble by saying we were engaged. I think the case will be dismissed. We won't know for a week or so. My phone rang for the 7th or 8th time in the previous hour. I glanced at the screen and turned it to silent. Then why are you moping? I shrugged. Had I really expected him to say his father was nuts on the stand? I'm not. I'm just stressed. Uh-huh. She shook my shoulder. We don't have to talk about it now, but I'll get it out of you sooner or later. I thought back to the argument Gabe and I had the night before. Do you think I'm too controlling? Controlling? You? Shauna scoffed. I'm serious. You've always known what you wanted in life. I rested my head on the back of the couch and stared at the ceiling. That sounds like a nice way of telling me I'm a control freak. Shauna tossed a pillow at me. Enough of the melodrama. What's up? I turned my head in her direction. Gabe told me he dumped me because he didn't fit into my plan. Bullshit. She glanced at the baby as if to make sure the infant wouldn't repeat after her. He dumped you because he's a jackass. Maybe. I'd never really understood why he'd broken things off, which is why I'd assumed he'd met someone else. Now that we'd finally discussed his reasons, I almost would have preferred he cheated. Him being a jerk was easier to swallow than me being neurotic. Even if he felt that way, why not talk to you about it instead of ignoring your calls? Nothing the man did made much sense. Trying to figure it out worked as well as bubble wrap on a hand grenade. I pushed my wounded feelings and doubts about my relationship with Gabe down deep enough I'd need an excavator to find them. You didn't come here to talk about my OCD. What did you want to tell me? My phone vibrated on the table. Shauna narrowed her eyes. Speaking of OCD, since when do you not answer your cell? I've been getting a ton of prank calls. Seriously? They started shortly after Gabe moved in. I'm thinking it's one of his groupies. My blood ran cold. Oh my God. I'm so stupid. Why didn't I think of this sooner? What? Chantal. I ran through everything I knew about the woman. It made perfect sense. She called the house the other day. She's the one harassing me. Shauna watched me for a long moment. It wouldn't surprise me, but you need to know for sure. I can trace the calls, but I'll need you to come into the office. Her offer tempted me, but I didn't have the energy to contemplate the implications. They were calls. Scary calls, but they weren't actual threats. Were they? The next time it vibrated, Shauna grabbed it before I could stop her. Hello. She turned and narrowed her eyes. Hi, Justin. This is Shauna, Maggie's friend. I wrestled the phone from her. Hello?
It was rude of you to hang up on me the other day. You should know I've contacted an attorney.
He sounded far too smug for a guy who'd cheated on his wife. You can't sue someone for hanging up.
Not that, you stupid bitch. I'm suing Marchionni. Unless, of course, you two pay up.
I disconnected and stared at the phone. Is he serious? Shauna rolled her eyes. You heard that? She nodded. We need to add him to the list of possible prank callers. There's no point. It's not Justin. The prank calls are coming from a woman. Regardless, we should have them traced. In the meantime, give Gabe a heads up. Yeah, I will. I cleared the emotion from my throat, but I couldn't stop my brain from spinning like a roulette wheel. Is this what it would be like to marry into the Marchionni family? How did Rebecca handle it? What was so urgent you needed to see me today? Shauna grinned. I found the BM. BM? Baby mama. I cringed, not knowing which nickname I found more troubling. Shauna pulled a thin manila folder from her bag. She's a performer on a cruise ship out of New Orleans. I opened it as a shot of adrenaline coursed through me. I'd crossed a line that I couldn't uncross. Nevertheless, I flipped through the pages of typical private investigator documents. The driving and criminal records were unremarkable, although the grainy DMV photo confirmed my suspicions. The woman was gorgeous. More concerning, she looked familiar. What is it? Shauna leaned closer to see what had caught my eye. It's hard to tell from this, but I think I've seen her somewhere. I'll dig up a better image. I'm sure the cruise line has promo material or employee badges. Maybe it's best you don't. I turned my attention back to the file. The credit report and bankruptcy filing surprised me, but the next piece of paper made my stomach turn. She's married? Was married. Shauna lowered her voice. Her husband committed suicide about 18 months ago. I did some fast math. I blew out a breath. Not that it mattered in the grand scheme of things, but the idea of Gabe sleeping with a married woman made my skin crawl. Before she got pregnant. Gabe said they dated a few times. You don't think the suicide had anything to do with him? There's more. Shauna perked up. On a whim, I cross-checked the Marchionni files with Chantal's. I know Papa Joe suspected her of having something to do with the accident. Right, and I think I know why. I got a hit on BM's husband. I had trouble keeping up with Shauna, but I thought I had the gist of it. What does Chantal's husband have to do with the Marchionnis? Martin Sinclair accused Papa Joe of sabotaging his business in order to force him to sell. A month later, Marchionni Corporation closed on his property and Martin killed himself. Shauna sounded like she had hit the lotto. Wait. I pressed my hand to my stomach to calm the churning. Shauna didn't wait. She barreled on. It gets better. 2 months later, Chantal filed for bankruptcy. I put the pieces together, but they didn't add up. Why did Chantal file for bankruptcy? Wouldn't the cash from the sale... Looks like it wasn't enough. Shauna shrugged. Or maybe they screwed her over. Either way, why would Chantal get involved with a Marchionni after that? Something told me I didn't want to know the answer. I stood and paced. Her husband dies, somehow leaving her broke, and she files for bankruptcy. Then she hooks up with Gabe and gets pregnant. Is this all part of a bigger plan? Maybe she wanted proof of wrongdoing and thought Gabe was an easy target? Or she's after his money, like Justin. I sank onto the sofa. I'm going to be sick. Shauna put her hand on my shoulder. I'm sorry. I know this is a lot to take in. I need to talk to Gabe. He doesn't know she used him. Are you sure? I'm not sure of anything, but something isn't right. This could end badly for Gabe. Chantal obviously needs money, which Gabe has warehouses of. Has he filed anything to establish legal paternity? Shauna chewed her lower lip. I don't know. Find out. She stood. I have to run, but I'll check in tomorrow. Thanks. I couldn't tear my gaze away from Ella. No matter how this all came to be, the baby didn't deserve to be treated like a bargaining chip. By the afternoon, I'd worked myself into such a funk I couldn't unravel the tangle of thoughts wadded up in my head. Needing cake and needing it bad, I went straight for the kitchen. The store-bought variety never calmed my nerves. In times like these, only my grandmother's double-fudge delight recipe would do the trick. Zach came home from school first. He took one look at the contents of the counter and went to the pantry for the powdered sugar and cocoa. Bad day. I wiped my eyes on the back of my hand. I've had better. Are you okay with what happened in court today? Yeah, I guess. He grinned, but I had a feeling he'd done it for my benefit. Need extra Xbox time? While I had a million questions, I refused to put him in the middle of the fight between me and his grandparents. I'll grease and flour the pans. Zach didn't ask for an explanation, though I knew he worried. Thanks. I rested my hand on his shoulder and supervised as he scooped out the shortening with a paper towel. Since I'd become his guardian, he'd developed a fear something would happen to me. The therapist said not to worry. Kids grieving their parents often became protective of their caregivers. That was all fine and well, but I suspected since he was the oldest and a boy, he thought of himself as the man of the house. Gabe came through the door with Ryan slung over one shoulder, his laptop bag on the other, and Chloe trailing behind him. He glanced between me and Zach.
Is Ella sleeping?
I stuck my head in the fridge to hide my ugly cry face. She's in her swing.
Everything okay? Are you coming down with something?
I frowned. Of course he'd comment on my puffy eyes and red nose. Allergies.
You look awful. Take something for it.
He set Ryan down.
Any word from the court?
Nope. I pressed my lips into a thin line and stared. We needed to talk, but not with so many little ears present.
I referred Mr. Trudeau to my lawyer today.
He called me today.
Don't take his calls. Santiago is handling it.
Gabe nodded toward the stairs.
I promised to play with the munchkins.
One less thing to worry about, I guess. I turned my attention back to the cake batter and ignored his irritated sigh. Have fun. Zach and I worked side by side, our silent labor interrupted by giggles and monster noises drifting down from the playroom. It would have been lovely to believe a happy ending waited at the end of the tunnel, but every day my doubts increased. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Hello? Hi, Maggie. This is Jessie. Can you come in tonight? One of the girls called in sick and I'm in a jam. I glanced at the clock. I can be there in an hour. We're slammed. Don't tell my cousin I said this, but the hotter you look, the hotter the tips. Good to know. I hung up and turned to Zach. I have to work tonight. Okay. He gave me a look I couldn't interpret. Sympathy? Frustration? Anger? Are you okay with me being out in the evenings? Yeah. It's nice having a guy around. I forced another smile. Take the cake out when the timer goes off. You remember how to make the frosting? Zach nodded and surprised me with a quick hug. I love you, Aunt Maggie. I love you too.
Chapter 25. Gabe. Chloe grinned and drew in a deep breath. Aunt Maggie's baking. I pressed pause on the video game and sniffed. Sure enough, the sweet scent of a chocolate cake filled the entire second floor. My favorite. Must be a special day. Chloe rolled her eyes. It's not a birthday, so she's sad. I tried to wrap my brain around Chloe's words. Cakes aren't for sad days. Ryan climbed onto my back for either a pony ride or a round 2 of wrestling. Cakes are for all days. Chloe gave the two of us a patient smile. Aunt Maggie makes cakes on birthdays and when she's cranky or sad. Huh. Girls are weird. I pulled Ryan around, pinned him to the ground, and tickled him until he squealed for mercy. I'm not weird. Chloe launched herself at us and peeled me away from her baby brother. Zach came upstairs and watched the wrestling match with a wry expression.
I hate to break up the party, but you should go talk to Maggie before she goes. I pulled both munchkins off me and stood. Where's she going? To work, at the bar. Your bar. Zach stared. He'd perfected the teenage ability to call adults stupid without saying a word. I'm on it. I took the stairs 2 at a time, crossed the house, and glanced in Maggie's room. Not finding her, I went into the master and knocked on the bathroom door. Come in. I hesitated, wondering if she realized it was me. She'd been almost hostile since I'd come home. Maggie, it's me. Come in. She added more irritation to the 2 syllables. Zach told me you're going into work? I walked in and stopped in my tracks. Jessie called. I figured you knew. She leaned over the sink, putting on mascara with her mouth hanging open and both eyes open wide. She's adorable. My gaze fell to her ass. Bent over the counter, she looked better than the cake smelled. I took a step forward and set my hand on her hip. You could be late. She glared at my reflection. I'm still upset with you. Is that why you were crying earlier? I caressed her shoulder. She turned and sidestepped me. I'm in a hurry. We'll talk about it later. I folded my arms and rested my hip against the vanity and considered the situation. Even though her words were less than friendly, she hadn't flinched when I'd touched her. The hurt look in her eyes concerned me, but she hadn't asked me to leave the room. The woman didn't seem to know what she wanted. Talk to me now. I followed her into her bedroom. Maggie opened her closet and riffled through shirt after shirt. Jessie suggested I dress sexy. What do you think? I think I'll have a little chat with Jessie. Jeans and a t-shirt are fine. Sneakers or comfortable boots. She pulled out a red, silky number that looked more like a bathing suit than a top. Before I could tell her not to wear the scrap of material, she whipped her shirt and bra off. My heart stopped beating when all my blood went south. A situation that didn't improve when she shimmied into the red halter top. Maggie. I spoke in a tone more warning than conversation. Gabe. She mimicked my voice. I wrapped my hands around her arms, pulled her against me, and kissed her smart mouth. She tensed but didn't pull away. I coaxed her lips open with my tongue and grabbed 2 handfuls of her hair. Tugging hard enough to elicit a soft moan, I nibbled a line down her neck. Maggie whispered, I'm going to be late. I don't care. I cupped her face and forced her to meet my gaze. What has you so upset? I've had a really bad day, but I can't get into it right now. The hitch in her voice made my heart clench. I've got you. Talk to me. Tonight, after work. I rested my forehead against hers. On one condition. What's that? She smiled at me for the first time in days. We have sex after, no matter what. She furrowed her brow. What if you're not happy with what I have to say? I kissed the corner of her mouth. Then I'll be happy afterward. Ella cried in the living room when I took a step toward the door. I'll get her, and I want you home as soon as it slows down. Maggie tilted her head. Won't I get fired for not finishing closing duties? Only if you wear that red top. 20 minutes later, I kissed her goodbye. She changed into a t-shirt. It fit tighter than I would have preferred for work, but I took the high road and kept my mouth shut. Never in my wildest dreams would I have imagined this would be my life. Sure, I'd always wanted a house full of kids, a wife, and a picket fence, but when I'd imagined my future, it had always included a stay-at-home wife, a nanny, visits to the country club, and time on the golf course. I'd thought I wanted a marriage like my parents had, until now. Maggie would never agree to give up her career, and I wouldn't expect her to. Though having some help around the house would be nice, but the woman refused to hire a nanny. No matter how shitty my day, Ella's bath time always cheered me up. Her jerky splashes and sweet cooing noises washed away my stress better than single malt scotch. Let's get you dressed. I released the water from the mini tub and wrapped her up before heading to the master bedroom. Determined to be free of her hooded towel, Ella wiggled in my arms. She'd plumped up over the previous 3 weeks and had started to develop a personality. I laid her on the changing table and tickled her tummy. Still damp and smelling like soap, she kicked her legs. I sang a couple of verses of a Louis Armstrong song while wrangling her into her PJs. The more I sang, the more she kicked, as if determined to keep me from closing the snaps and ending our special time. Be still. Laughing, I glanced at her face. Ella's eyes met mine, and she smiled her first, big, bright,
toothless baby smile. Right then and there, I fell in love. Before that moment, I'd protected and cared for her, but this was something different. Ella had carved herself a hole in my heart that nothing and no one except she could fill. My daughter had wrapped me around her tiny finger with a smile. I reached in my pocket for my phone. I had to call and tell Maggie what had happened. Better yet, I'd take a picture and text it to her. I made faces at Ella, played peekaboo, even blew on her tummy, but nothing I did made her smile. Giving up, I picked her up and started humming again. She freaking smiled. You like my singing? I laid her on the bed and readied my cell. Before I could snap the picture, the dog started barking and Zach called my name. I carried Ella down the hall and immediately wanted to turn around and lock myself in the bedroom. The damn dog scarfed bits of cake from the floor while Zach, also on the floor, tried to pull her back. Determined to finish her dessert, Coco inhaled and gagged at the same time like a malfunctioning vacuum cleaner. What happened? I set Ella in her porta crib, grabbed the dog's collar, and pulled her out of the kitchen. She might have been a chocolate lab, but eating that much chocolate cake would give her the runs. Coco got under my feet and twisted my ankle. Zach held his lower calf. Chloe and Ryan appeared at the bottom of the stairs and took in the show. Let me take a look at it. Ignoring the fact that Coco had followed me back into the kitchen, I knelt beside Zach. No, it's fine. Don't be silly, let me see. I reached for his foot and he moved away. Don't touch it! His reaction reminded me he was still a kid. I lowered my voice. I can look at it now, or we can call Maggie home and I can take you to the ER for someone else to look at it. No! Zach cried out. I don't need to go to the hospital. I reached for his foot again. This time, he let me take a look. It's not too swollen. Ice it. If it gets worse, we should get it checked out. I'm on it. Chloe filled a baggie with ice. Unfortunately, she spilled half of it on the floor. I'm on it too. Ryan tossed the cubes into the sink, one at a time. Coco retched in the living room, and we all moved at once. I went for the damn dog, Coco dodged, ran to the corner, and puked. Chloe ran for the bathroom, Zach scrambled to his feet and set Ryan on the couch. Go ice your ankle, I got this. I pulled the dog out the back door. Zach hobbled into the living room and sat beside his brother. Fearing the sight of vomit had made her sick, I hurried to the bathroom to check on Chloe. You okay? Yep. The girl practiced her dance moves in the mirror. In the time it took me to get back into the living room, the dog had come back inside and left another mess. To be honest, I had no idea which end the pile of brown goo had come out of. Adding insult to injury, Ryan had escaped the couch and was sitting in the middle of the kitchen floor eating chocolate frosting out of the bowl, along with the idiot dog. I would have cried, but I had been raised to believe that guys didn't shed tears. They yelled, For Christ's sake, nobody move! Ella let loose a scream that hit the same pitch as a knife scraping a plate. You get her. I'll take Ryan. Zach limped to the kitchen and yanked the bowl away from his brother. This sent the boy into a full-blown tantrum. You need to ice your ankle, I shouted over the din. I will, but right now you're seriously outnumbered. Okay, you throw Ryan in the bathtub and stay with him. I'll settle Ella and clean up after the dog. I dragged Coco out back and made sure to turn the lock near the top of the door, out of Ryan's reach. Holding Ryan at arm's length to avoid being slimed, Zach hobbled down the hall. This is between you and me, man to man. The girls don't need to know. Gotcha, Zach called from the bathroom. The girls don't need to know what? Chloe looked at her chocolate-covered brother and squealed. Maggie's cake's ruined. We'll make a new one. Zach motioned to the screaming baby. Go give Ella her pacifier. Boys are weird. Chloe shrugged and skipped around the piles of chocolate vomit toward the porta crib. I pulled my hair into a ponytail and went to the utility room to fill the mop bucket. I'd never have thought this would be my life, but I wouldn't trade any of it. Except I'd exchange the damn dog with a nanny.
Chapter 26. Maggie. People packed every inch of the bar, most of whom shouted their orders. By now, I could mix most drinks without engaging my brain, which was good, because all I could think about were the files I'd hidden in my room and court. I doubted Gabe knew about Chantal's connection to the Marchionni Corporation. If he had, he wouldn't have started a relationship with her. Would he? I didn't know the woman, but I feared Chantal would use Ella to extort money from him. I needed to ask the man some tough questions. If we could find 5 minutes alone together.
Maggie, go on a break.
Jessie called from the other end of the bar. The crowd had thinned somewhat, but not enough for one person to handle orders. You sure? Go. 2 long necks dangling from each hand, Jessie winked. Before I change my mind. In the break room, I sank into one chair and propped my aching feet onto another. Opting for fashion over function turned out to be a bad idea. Likewise, tight t-shirt had increased my tips, but I'd had more male attention than I could handle. I pulled my phone from my back pocket. No texts or missed calls. It should have been a good thing. Gabe could take care of the kids without my help, but it bothered me. The first couple of months after my sister died had been horrible, and not just because of our grief. The kids had tested me at every turn. More days than not, I'd considered handing them over to Evelyn and running for the hills. The idea Gabe could waltz in and run things without a hiccup made me more than a little jealous. Deep in the throes of an aching feet failure as a mom pity party, I didn't hear anyone come in. A male voice spoke behind me.
Maggie?
I yelped and turned to find another of the Marchionni boys at the door. Leo was as luscious as Gabe, though taller and thinner. He had the same green eyes as his brothers, but he wore his dark hair short, accentuating the sharp angles of his face. Hi, Leo.
Did Jessie call you in?
He looked somewhere between confused and amused. Yeah, but I'm on break. I pulled my feet off the chair. He took it as an invitation and sat.
Rumor has it you're going to be my new sister-in-law.
So I hear.
Never thought I'd see the day.
He chuckled and ran his hand over the back of his neck, a habit he shared with his older brother. I hear tales of women from the surrounding parishes organizing to take me down. I wrinkled my nose. He was a bit of a ladies' man.
Besides the debacle with Chantal, not really. After you, he put everything he had into this bar.
Oh. The need to remove my foot from my mouth overtook me. Leo seemed to sense my discomfort and flashed me the patented Marchionni grin.
It's good to see him happy again. He's like a changed man.
You see a difference in him? I probably shouldn't have asked, but they were close. If anyone could give me some insight into Gabe's psyche, it was Leo.
Yeah, I would have chalked it up to getting some, but he's a man in love. All he talks about are you and the kids.
Leo's smile faltered.
Nothing personal, but he's a better man than I am. No way could I walk into a ready-made family.
I laughed and stood. He's a better man than I am, too.
You guys are good together.
Thanks. I still had my doubts, but overall I agreed. He stood and drew me into a hug. A little voice inside my head reminded me that I had a story to write. I needed to ask about the business, about the family secrets, about something other than Gabe. Leo released me.
I should let you get back to work.
Do you think he'll be happy taking over for your father? Not the most eloquent question, but it went straight to the point.
I do. He's going to be a family man now. Priorities shift.
Can he do it? I mean, can he be as ruthless as Papa Joe? Leo squeezed my shoulder.
Hell yeah. Do you remember what a dump this place used to be? He worked his ass off to save it.
But running a bar and running a company the size of Marchionni Corp are two different things. People come here because they love Gabe. Your father's not exactly known as a nice guy. He leaned closer and lowered his voice.
Don't let Gabe's good looks fool you. He's as much a shark as Papa Joe.
I shuddered on the inside, but kept my plastic smile in place. I worry it'll change him.
It may, but he has you to keep him honest.
Leo headed for the door.
I have some stuff to do in the office. Catch you later.
I made my way down the hall. The ache in my feet paled in comparison to the ache in my gut. Could the same guy who'd built blanket forts with Ryan run a multi-billion-dollar company? A multi-billion-dollar company that might or might not be a front for the mob? Absorbed in my thoughts, I collided with a wall of a man. Excuse me.
No problem, gorgeous.
The guy looked me over as if I were a dessert tray.
That's some frown. Let me buy you a drink.
I'm working, but thanks.
In that case, I'll have a gin and tonic, hold the tonic.
He took a step closer, and I took 2 steps behind the bar. Feeling more secure with a physical barrier between me and the big guy, I poured him a gin on the rocks, added a lime wedge, and set his glass on the bar.
What time do you get off?
He set a 20 on the bar. Back off, Wayne. She's engaged. Jessie crowded in beside me.
No ring. Whoever the yahoo is, he must be a loser.
Wayne smirked.
I'd put a rock the size of a robin's egg on that pretty finger.
Jessie grinned at me.
Watch out for Wayne. He's one of New Orleans' finest.
A shot of adrenaline coursed through me. I had absolutely no reason to fear a police officer, or did I? Hadn't Gabe paid one off? You're a cop?
A detective? Yes, ma'am. Lying to me is a felony. Are you really betrothed?
The grin never leaving his face, he sipped his drink.
This isn't a Jane Austen novel, and yes, she's really engaged to Gabe.
Jessie's perpetual smile brightened. He coughed gin out his nose and mouth. I moved down the bar and took another order while he cleared the 90-proof top-shelf liquor from his nasal passages.
Tell me how Gabe locked you down without a ring.
They've been busy, Jessie said.
I bet they have.
Wayne wiggled his brows. I groaned. Jessie, don't help. She chuckled and took another order. I wanted to crawl under a rock. Not only did he laugh, the commotion had drawn the attention of several patrons.
Congratulations.
Wayne shoved his paw across the bar.
I'm Detective Wayne O'Malley.
Maggie Guthrie. I shook his hand. His expression changed from congenial to knocked for 6.
Any relation to Rebecca Guthrie Marchionni?
My sister? The detective frowned and looked down at the contents of his drink. The change in his mood piqued my curiosity. Did you know her?
I worked the accident investigation.
I held on to the edge of the bar to keep from toppling over. Can I ask you a question privately? He glanced between me and Jessie as if weighing his options, or maybe he thought she'd save him. Hard to tell. I moved from behind the bar and rested my hand on his arm. Please. He nodded once and pushed to his feet. Any remaining warmth bled from his eyes. He squared his shoulders, stiffened his spine, and raised his chin. Heck, he even walked differently. Had I not witnessed the change in him, I would have thought the laughing guy and the detective were 2 different people. The new version scared the crap out of me. I didn't know if I wanted to ask the questions, let alone hear the answers, but I followed him outside. Wayne folded his arms and settled the weight of his stare on me.
What can I do for you?
I debated beating around the bush, but decided to get straight to it. Do you believe my sister's death was an accident? He drew a deep breath and exhaled with a faint wheeze.
That's what the final report says.
That's not what I asked you. I decided to try a different tactic. I lowered my gaze, slumped my shoulders, and softened my voice. Please, I need to know. I'm about to marry into this family. I have to know if the kids and I are in danger.
You have kids?
His voice rose in volume and pitch. I'd evidently hit a nerve. Fidgeting with my hands, I nodded. I have custody of Joe and Rebecca's 3. Wayne sucked air through his teeth, looked up at the sky, and cursed under his breath.
Is it true Gabe's taking over for Papa Joe?
I nodded because I didn't trust my voice to come out normal. I'd gone from playing a victim to feeling like one.
The Marchionnis have a way of pissing off people. I don't think there's imminent danger, but caution never hurt anyone.
People like Martin Sinclair? Wayne's eyes grew larger before he could sink back behind his detective mask. Did he have anything to do with what happened to my sister?
Martin Sinclair died before the collision.
What about his wife? Was she questioned?
I'm not at liberty to say.
Wayne motioned to me.
You're good. Batted those lashes and I fell for it.
I shrugged one shoulder. Wouldn't you do whatever you had to do to protect the people you love? Oddly enough, he glanced back toward the bar.
Yeah, I would.
I'll ask you again. Do you think it was an accident? He turned back to me.
My gut tells me no, but my superiors put a hell of a lot of pressure on us to close the case.
I'd read as much in the report, but I appreciated his honesty. Did Papa Joe pressure the department? He blew out a breath.
You're killing me. Let's just say pressure comes from all sides in high-profile cases.
My head spun. I felt like I'd walked into a made-for-television melodrama. Are they mafia?
Honey, if you have to ask me that, you shouldn't marry Gabe.
I hugged myself and bent forward a few inches. It had all happened so fast. I loved him, but was that enough? Wayne laid his hand on my shoulder.
Don't fall apart on me now.
Am I raising the next generation of mafia? Am I engaged to the next freaking godfather? I righted myself and met his gaze. I'm afraid of what I don't know. Wayne glanced up the street and lowered his voice again.
What they call themselves doesn't matter. You don't get the level of power and influence the Marchionnis have without pissing people off and breaking a few laws. Take my advice. Leave the accident alone. Nothing good will come of poking around in this.
Maybe you're right. His head remained still, but his gaze darted to the side. I caught movement from the corner of my eye, and unlike the detective, I turned and locked eyes with the guy in the leather jacket. I pressed my hand to my chest and took a step behind Wayne. I think that man's following me.
The detective nodded. Wouldn't surprise me. He's on the Marchionni payroll. The question is, why are they having you tailed?
My grandmother used to have these seizures where she'd stare off into space like she'd vacated her body. I had one of those right there in the middle of the French Quarter. 1 minute I was talking to Wayne, the next everything stopped. No sound, no sight, nothing except me and blinding fear.
Maggie?
The detective called to me, but he seemed a million miles away.
Miss Guthrie, are you okay?
I snapped back into the present. I need to get out of here.
I'll drive you home.
He narrowed his eyes at Mr. Leather Jacket. The guy held his arms up as if to say, busted, and walked away. I can call a rideshare.
I'm not letting you out of my sight in your current state of mind.
Wayne led me back into the bar, said something to Jesse, and followed me to the office.
Maggie, listen. Gabe's a good guy. Give him a chance to answer your questions before you go into hiding, but you have to ask him.
I will. I couldn't help but wonder if he would have said the same thing if I'd told him my fiancé had a child with Martin Sinclair's wife.